I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Queen Elizabeth's lady-in-waiting resigns over racist questioning, threatening to overshadow Prince William's so-called Super Bowl moment.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, December the 1st. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
So Prince William's godmother, Lady Susan Hussey, has apologised after she repeatedly asked a black guest at a Buckingham Palace reception where she was really from. A spokesperson for Prince William, who's currently in Boston for his Earthshot Prize, said it is right that Lady Hussey has stepped down.
And the Prime Minister has created a special strikes unit to tackle the wave of walkouts that are disrupting services every day until Christmas. It comes as more than 10,000 ambulance workers become the latest group to vote for industrial action.
The government has made an emergency request to use police cells to house prisoners in an attempt to alleviate jail overcrowding. The Prisons Minister blamed the surge in part on the barristers' strikes in the summer.
And the first female referee team to preside over a Men's World Cup game debut tonight when Costa Rica play Germany. We're going to be asking a female ref what this milestone means to her.
And we are the People's Channel. We love to hear from you, so do get in touch on Twitter or on email. That's gbnews@gbnews.uk. And remember to let us know where you're watching or listening from. So our top story this morning, the late Queen's lady-in-waiting has resigned over racist comments she made to a black British woman at a Buckingham Palace reception.
Lady Susan Hussey, who's also Prince William's godmother, has apologised for the incident.
The Prince and Princess of Wales are currently in Boston as they prepare for Friday's Earthshot Prize Awards ceremony. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker is there and sent us this report.
Well, this has turned into a bit of a headache for the royal family, particularly the Prince and Princess of Wales, who have arrived in Boston ahead of Prince William's Environmental Earthshot Prize, which is happening on Friday. But even before their plane touched down, there was controversy, and that is all because Prince William's godmother asked a British-born black domestic abuse campaigner where she really came from during a reception at Buckingham Palace. Now, the accusations were aired on Twitter, and then Buckingham Palace had to quickly, and did very quickly, release release a statement saying that they take the incident extremely seriously. They have reached out to Ngozi Fulani, who is the advocate at the reception, to see if she wanted to discuss in person her experiences at that reception. Buckingham Palace went on to say the individual concerned wishes to express their profound apologies for the hearse cause and stepped away from her honorary role. Now, another indication that the royal family is taking this extremely seriously. I now understand that Prince William very much agrees that his godmother should have stepped away from her role. And Prince William's spokesperson also released a statement. Now, he said, "I was really disappointed to hear about the guest's experience at Buckingham Palace. The comments were unacceptable, and it is right the individuals have stepped aside with immediate effect." Now, despite another royal race row and the rain quite literally dampening people's spirits here, the Prince and Princess were greeted by crowds from across America. People had travelled as far as Alaska to see them, and this is what Prince William said to the crowds.
Thank you to all the hardy Bostonians braving the rain this evening. 60 years ago, President John F. Kennedy's moonshot speech laid down a challenge to American innovation and ingenuity. "We choose to go to the moon," he said, "not because it is easy, but because it is hard." It was that moonshot speech that inspired me to launch the Earthshot Prize with the aim of doing the same for climate change as President Kennedy did for the space race.
Now, today, the Prince and Princess will be visiting one of the most deprived areas of Massachusetts and meeting vulnerable young people. They'll also be seeing how Boston has become a global leader when it comes to climate change and tackling the climate crisis. And no doubt Palace aides are hoping that this one incident is the only thing that's going to distract from Prince William's Earthshot Prize.
Well, joining us now is our royal and showbiz reporter from LA, Kinsey Schofield. Good morning to you, Kinsey. Oh, my goodness me, the timing of this is so unfortunate. Pure gasoline being poured onto the fire here.
Absolutely. And I just want to stress, Lady Susan Hussey is an 83-year-old widow who gave 60 years of service to the crown. And not once has she ever been accused of being racist or saying anything racist towards anyone else. I mean, truly, these are accusations made by an individual. I think she was very kind to apologize and to step back. But I do think that we are maybe jumping the gun and being so critical of Lady Susan Hussey, because from all we can tell, I mean, Richard Kay's column today in the Daily Mail is glowing about the woman and says she's a very kind woman, and she was such a critical part of the palace and the people and that communication. Is this a misunderstanding? Was it just tone? Was it rude? I don't know. I think, you know, racism, it's debatable, and this is a really difficult subject to talk about, and I'd like to avoid the topic, but in this particular situation, I sympathize with both women, but I also say let's not villainize Lady Susan Hussey.
I suppose when you question whether or not it's racism, Ngozi Fulani said that she felt it was offensive and unwelcoming and had been violated by the questioning. And it was specifically when Lady Hussey had said, "No, but where do your people come from?" At which point she replied, "My people, lady, what is this?" I mean, it certainly is extremely unfortunate and, as you can see, offensive. And look, she may not be a racist herself, but that is racist questioning.
I mean, I think that it's like you said, it's horrible wording. It's unfortunate wording. But Isabel, if you watched Dan Wooten last night, Dan showed a series of tweets where the accuser is attacking the British royal family, saying that they perpetuated domestic violence against Meghan Markle. I mean, are you walking into this situation with an agenda? That is what I'd like to know.
Kinsey, what about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry? They've got various friends who pop up and speak to the media, particularly when there's a controversy like this. Have we heard from them yet?
We have not, but, I will say Richard Kay talks about this in the Daily Mail, and you'll see this on social media. Their palace aides, people that are currently working for the family, were kind of taken aback by the fact that the family apologized so quickly, released a statement, and that Lady Susan was gone so quickly. And the reasoning is that they are very, very nervous about this new Netflix show. And they're afraid that the Netflix show, that this This is going to be the tone of it. Racism, victimhood. And this, like Isabel said at the beginning of this conversation, is this the gasoline on an open fire that the palace does not need right now? Prince William doesn't want to be answering questions about racism while he's in Boston for Earthshot. And it does seem like the palace acted much faster than they normally would and in a much more aggressive way than they normally would because they want to shut this down.
Yeah, and look, we've talked before, Kinsey, about this Ripple of Hope award that the Sussexes are due to pick up next week for challenging structural racism within the royal family. The context of this now, admittedly, Lady Hussey herself, not a royal, but so connected to the family. Oh, as I say, just the timing is just... almost couldn't make it up, could you?
No, I mean, and I'm sorry to all parties involved. I can't stress that enough. And this is a very difficult subject to talk about. But I do feel like we're so hypersensitive when it comes to race, and we all should step back and ask each other, how can I communicate with you? What makes you feel comfortable? I recently had this conversation with somebody, and I said, well, what do you prefer? Because, you know, it's all about teachable moments and educating each other. We don't need to attack, cancel, fire, you know, ruin somebody's reputation. This is an 83-year-old woman now who, when you Google her name, it's going to be horrible things written about her. And I just don't want to live in a world like that.
Yeah, OK. Really good to talk to you, Kinsey Schofield. Thank you very much indeed for your take on this huge story. Thanks very much.
It's really difficult for them because it's their first time on American soil since 2014. We know the Meghan and Harry book is coming out in January. We know the Netflix documentary is coming out. We know that Meghan Markle made that inflammatory allegation on talking to Oprah Winfrey about a senior unnamed royal who asked a racist question about what colour their children would be.
Yeah, and we also know how badly the last trip overseas the Waleses went, and you know how sensitive they are about all this and how they don't want to put a foot wrong. And it's being described as his, you know, his pet project, his Super Bowl moment. And to get a few people, a smattering, as it's being described in your paper this morning, of boos for them at the basketball match, it's just the sort of stuff they really didn't want to happen.
But a real sign that the palace are taking no chances.
Absolutely.
That's why she's gone so quickly.
Absolutely. So
by the way, Susan Hussey's never been paid a penny in the 62 years she worked for the Queen and the royal family. Not a penny.
Well, let us know your thoughts on that story this morning. We're going to move on to politics now. The Prime Minister has created a so-called Winter of Discontent unit to try and coordinate the government's response to what we know is a series of strikes that will disrupt services every day now until Christmas.
It comes as more than 100,000 ambulance workers become the latest group to vote for industrial action.
Well, let's speak to former aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Leon Emirali. Good morning to you, Leon. This is, I suppose, a very pragmatic response from the Prime Minister setting up this task force, this particular unit, and it's going to be headed up, I believe, by Oliver Dowden. What will the role be?
I think it will be essentially looking across all government departments to find a way that we can manage this disruption that is inevitably going to come with these series of strikes every day up until Christmas. And I do just think that Oliver Dowden's got a big task on his hands to coordinate that government response and make sure the country can cope and can still function.
Do you think the army will be deployed? Because if ambulance workers go on strike, that really could put lives in danger. There'd be an irony if they do get involved because they've accepted a pay offer less than the ambulance workers have rejected.
Indeed, and I feel sorry for those in the army who are potentially looking over their shoulder thinking, well, what's going to land on my plate? Am I going to have to be driving ambulances or bringing sick people to hospitals in one vehicle or another? So, I do feel as if the army being on standby for this type of thing is not what they're there for, not what they signed up for, but I've no doubt that if they are called upon, then they'll do a phenomenal job.
Steve Barclay yesterday, the Health Secretary, talking about these requests. He was responding specifically to the Unison strike yesterday, but he said the demands are not affordable. Each additional 1% pay rise for all staff on the Agenda for Change contract would cost around £700 million a year. Why is that message not getting through?
Well, I think the unions recognise they've got ministers over a barrel because there is a labour shortage for various different reasons, and they realise that now's the time, an opportune moment for them to ask for pay rise. The money isn't there, as Steve Barclay was saying. So we can't give them this pay rise if the money in the public purse doesn't exist. And I think there has to be some courage for ministers to really hammer that home to the union bosses and make sure they hear it.
And wasn't there a pay review body recommending a pay rise? I think the nurses got £1,400. Some of them it meant it was about a 9% increase. They've had that, and yet still they're after, 17.6%? which is way above the rate of inflation.
It is, and look, I respect nurses to the hilt. I think they do a phenomenal job, and they do deserve to be paid fairly. But they have to recognise the wider economic situation we find ourselves in. There are very few people in this country who are getting a pay rise right now, and nurses have to rally behind the country, recognise it's going to be tough times. In a couple of years, let's hope the economy's looking better, and then they can get that pay rise they deserve.
It feels coordinated to me. Across the different industries, the rail workers going on strike, the ambulance workers, the nurses. We know the trade union movement is fed up to the back teeth of 12 years of Tory rule. Does it feel like that to you, that this is a move not just to get better paying conditions for their members, but also to damage politically the government?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. We know how the unions operate. We've been around long enough to recognise that. It feels very much like the late 70s, that winter of discontent, and I think we're heading for that once again. It won't be lost on the unions that there's an election around the corner in a couple of years, and they want to position the government in a way that says these guys can't run the country in the way we want it to be run. So I do think it's political motivated just as much as standing up for their members.
Of course, it's the ordinary people, not just now people trying to get to work, but patients, children in hospitals, people suffering from cancer, patients who won't get the normal service over the next few weeks, that will be seeing the direct results of these strikes.
They will be, and my heart goes out to anyone who's got an operation scheduled that's had to be cancelled, or anyone who falls ill over that period when ambulance drivers are striking. So these are serious matters. This is life and death, and I think that shouldn't be taken into trivial matters of politics that a lot of these unions are deploying.
You've worked with Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary. He's out there quite a lot, unlike a lot of other ministers who seem to have disappeared. Can he win a public relations war with the nursing union?
Well, it's going to be tough, but what I will say about Steve Barclay is, he is a fantastic negotiator. We saw that when he renegotiated the Brexit withdrawal agreement, and I think that, Steve recognises there has to be pragmatism for any negotiations with nurses, and, ultimately it is going to be a PR battle, and I'm sure he's up for the fight.
Speaking of PR battles, MPs are set to get a pay rise, aren't they? 2.5%. This could be covered two ways from a PR perspective. Either, look at them getting a pay rise whilst other people are, struggling, etc., etc. Or you could see it as an example being set because they've agreed 2.5%, haven't they? Significantly less than, for example, the nurses.
Yes, and we have to remember the MPs don't have a say in how much they get paid. That's done by an independent body. But it just doesn't look right, does it? The optics of it don't look right, even if it is only a small pay rise. And I do just think that MPs, last week we were talking about getting their Christmas parties expensed. This week we're talking about a pay rise. So there is one rule for them, one rule for another. I think we need to stop that.
I bet you Rishi Sunak, of course he's a very wealthy man, will very publicly say, I won't take the pay rise. And you watch Keir Starmer follow suit, or Keir Starmer will go first and Rishi Sunak will follow suit. We have to say, MPs have had a 20% pay rise over the last 10 years. Eat your hearts out if you're a nurse or a paramedic.
Absolutely, a cost of living crisis.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Leon Emirali, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
OK, the time is 6:15. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories this hour.
A charity's warning of a homelessness emergency as a new survey suggests private renters under threat of eviction in England increases by more than 3/4 in a year. Shelter says 5% of private renters, that's about 500,000 people, say they've had an eviction notice or been threatened with eviction in the last month.
The NHS say they've gone live with a new system to help ease the pressures on the health service. More than 40 traffic control centres will help to find beds faster for patients. Winter war rooms across England will use data to enable staff to divert ambulances away from hospitals at capacity to ones with space available for new patients.
I wonder why they don't do that
Exactly.
all the time. Why don't they do that all the time, for heaven's sake? And sad news, Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks have led the tributes to the one-of-a-kind Christine McVie. Following the Fleetwood Mac star's death, she was 79. She wrote some of their best songs. Her family said she passed away peacefully yesterday after a short illness. Stevie Nicks called her my best friend in the whole world.
Now, there's been a new survey done about the happiest place in the UK to live. I don't know about you. For me, I'm drawn to the seaside.
Yep.
And if I could be at the seaside and work, I would, but I just can't, especially getting up the hours that we do. So probably no surprise then that it is a seaside town that has come out on top. Any guesses?
I suspect it's Cornwall or Devon.
Good, cool.
Right.
Warm.
please don't tell me it's St Ives.
It
because,
is St
Oh,
Ives.
no. Oh, no.
Why?
The last time I went there, it was just so swamped with people. You had to leave. It
Yeah.
was too many people.
Well, probably in peak time, if you do go July, August, maybe.
Cardiff Bay, a little closer. You can get on a little railway line. Delightful. But the Cornish coastline is stunning.
My goodness, if you walk along that coastline, you've got the white sand beaches, you've got all the seals, you can sometimes see dolphins, all the wild flora and fauna, gorgeous pubs,
Yeah.
Cornish pasty.
Yeah.
If only I could live there and do this
Yeah,
job, I
know.
would.
It's too far. That's the other
It's
thing
too far
about
to
Cornwall.
commute. But listen, we want to know where your favourite place in the UK is. Do you love where you live? Do you think St Ives is indeed the best place to live? They say there's a sense of belonging in the area there. It's the #1 factor that contributes to it being the best. This was a survey by Rightmove, and they surveyed 21,000 people. So let us know your favourite place.
Lots of Rick Stein restaurants too.
Yeah, he kind of owns St
Yeah, he
Ives,
does
doesn't
really. I think he lives in Australia too.
Oh, typical.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, he does have very good restaurants.
He
to
does.
be fair, he knows about
the food
fish.
is great,
Yeah.
particularly the fish. Now, the Social Market Foundation has published a new report which suggests millions of British people are going to struggle to pay their energy bills this winter if the prices continue to remain high and the government don't expand the support network.
Well, the report, which found that 3 million households who do not receive pensions or benefits will spend as much as 10% of their income on energy bills after British Gas announced that they'll pay customers to use less energy.
Well, we're joined this morning by consumer champion Will Hodson, who's here to tell us more. Good morning, Will.
Morning.
How you doing?
Hello. Yeah, not so bad, thank you.
It's more of the same, Will, and it's more bleak news, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's a reminder that if we thought that the need for support was going to go away after this next extension of the energy price guarantee, I'm afraid we're kidding ourselves. There are going to be 3 million people, according to this report from the Social Market Foundation, who are still going to be deeply, desperately mired in fuel poverty. And that underlines the challenge facing the government now to find a way to target support towards the people who need it the most.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Will, because I thought the problem with Liz Truss's plan when she was briefly Prime Minister, we all got the same support. And people tell me it's far too complicated to means test it, but it means the King and the Prime Minister are getting the same support as somebody in a 2-bedroom tower block flat.
That was precisely the problem with the energy price guarantee as conceived by Liz Truss. Effectively what it did was it paid half of every bill in the land. Whether you were a nurse desperately struggling to make ends meet, getting, let's say, £750 of a £1,500 bill annually, you would also be getting half if you were a millionaire in a mansion in Mayfair, getting £5,000 a year towards a £10,000 bill that you didn't really need help with. So that was the problem. It wasn't just morally outrageous, it was also economically absurd, which was a large part of the reason that the markets took against Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. So that was the approach we've thrown out of the window, universal support. The order of the day now is targeting. Yes, it is complicated, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. And we've got a while to get it right, so I think that's going to be towards the top of Jeremy Hunt's priorities.
It's interesting how we introduced this as saying people concerned that they might not be able to afford it if current prices continue. But that's the big if in all of this, isn't it? I mean, is there any suggestion that they will continue beyond April? Because that's the reason, isn't it, that the government's dovetailing the end of the package? Or is it to do with consumption being reduced at that point due to warmer temperatures?
Well, consumption is probably the key issue in all of this, because no matter what, the only way you know your bill is going to come down, is if you reduce your usage. So I think once the government looks up and recognises the fact that we're going to be on the hook as taxpayers for bills for many years going ahead, I think they see that the first order of the day is going to be reducing usage whichever way you can, which is why they've put this £1 billion into the eco scheme, which is going to help install energy efficiency measures and insulation up and down the country. That is the way you reduce your bill, by reducing your usage. But can we hope that the price, not usage, the price of energy is going to fall as well? That is completely out of our hands, and it will be out of our hands as long as we are reliant on gas coming very largely from overseas. Longer term, we want to have a fuel mix which is more reliant on domestically generated, sustainable energy and the new nuclear, which is going to be coming on stream in Hinkley Point in the years ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because wind power, of course, is a huge part of the government's armoury in the battle to get fuel prices down. And of course, it's much more environmentally friendly. But, well, you know this better than me. In the last week or so, the wind has dropped and we're generating very little wind power, which is going to have potentially an impact on prices.
Yeah. Well, let's look at what wind is supposed to do. And you're absolutely right, it's cheaper. It costs about 1/8 of gas to power our homes, and the electricity that comes out at the end of it is exactly the same. Never forget that Britain is reliant on gas, not just for our gas, but we actually get most of our electricity from burning gas. So that's what offshore wind can do. You're quite right. Sometimes it will not blow. What are the solutions to that? Well, one, you have various different wind farms around our British coastline. So it might not be blowing off of Aberdeen, but that doesn't mean it's not blowing off of our favourite town to live in, St Ives. So you could be actually balancing out your needs with sustainable energy sources. But that's where nuclear comes in. When you can't rely on sustainable sources, renewable energy, you need to have a reliable base load that you can source from something like gas, which is hugely risky, hugely expensive, or, and here's where our future may lie, nuclear, where you can actually rely on it a bit better.
OK, Will Hodson, really good to get your thoughts this morning, consumer champion from How to Save It. Thank you, always good to see you. We're going to take a break. After that, we'll be going through your papers this morning with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell. We'll see you in a moment.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a cold start out there for many of us. A frost in places, foggy for some as well, damp for others. So a mixture across the UK at the moment. But we've all got something in common, and that is a large area of high pressure extending from the east. That's mostly keeping these weather fronts at bay, but one such feature has snuck in from the west to affect Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England during the last 24 hours. Now, for Scotland and the far north of England, it is a damp and dull start to the day, the rain continuing through much of the day here. Northern Ireland, brighter skies arrive, but for much of England and Wales, dense fog patches first thing. Could be tricky on the roads, for example. The fog does slowly lift and brighter skies do emerge in the south and across Wales, where we see that happening 7 to 11 Celsius, but where we do see some stubborn fog persisting into the afternoon, 2 to 5 Celsius. It is actually a little milder for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, however, because we've got a bit more of a southerly breeze here. That breeze will push the rain into eastern Scotland, the northeast of England by the end of the night tonight. But elsewhere across the UK, a lot of cloud remains. Low cloud through central parts, some dense fog patches by dawn, and again a touch of frost in places. Now, the brightest skies first thing tomorrow will be across parts of Wales and the southwest. Northern Ireland as well, faring well for sunshine, and eventually western Scotland. The rain in the far northeast eventually peters away, so most places will see a dry Friday, and the fog in the south will also lift. I think more likely to lift compared with recent days because the breeze from the east is picking up. Now, that breeze will become an increasingly dominant feature of the forecast over the next few days. It will tend to prevent a fog and frost forming at night, but it will also bring colder air this weekend. So brighter skies on Saturday and Sunday, but with a downturn in temperatures, some rain and hill snow showers.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip
of the iceberg. And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. Lots of news coming in thick and fast on all sorts of topics this morning. Sue says she's an elderly lady. This is in relation to the royal racism row, and has already apologised. At best, it was ignorant. At worst, it was rude. But racist, I would say no.
And David says, I think what Lady Hussey meant, but obviously was worded incorrectly, was where are your family roots?
Whereas James says the issue is the lady pursued the same question with different wording for 5 or 6 times and wasn't happy until she could hear the word Caribbean. That is racism. Imagine making a white person answer the same question 6 times. You might be treated as a sociopath.
It's going to run this one, but
It's a
I
big
do wonder,
story.
the woman in question has a very, very forensic recollection of every word that was uttered in that
Perhaps
conversation.
if you feel offended, you
Yep.
do make notes in that way. I don't know, but you know.
I have to say, as a
lots of questions
journalist,
to ask.
often when I used to pick up a good story, if I was in a restaurant or reception, I'd disappear to the loo and make notes.
Absolutely. Contemporaneous notes.
Yes, contemporaneous
Absolutely.
notes, and I put the
First rule of
time in the
journalism.
notepad. Yeah.
Absolutely, me
Yeah.
too. Right, we're going to bring you up to date with the front pages of the newspapers. Unsurprisingly, lots of that story for you on there. Here's the Mail, your paper, Andrew.
Yeah, they're focusing on the royal racism row, calling it the meet and greet that sparked a royal disaster.
In the Express, they report Prince William has condemned his godmother's comments, calling them unacceptable.
And the Times also covers that story and pays tribute to the death of Fleetwood Mac's Christine McVie.
70% of England's water firms are in foreign hands, says The Guardian. The paper also says pension funds and businesses in tax havens have bought up our water industry.
And the Telegraph says there'll be strikes on every day until Christmas as unions gear up for industrial action across the entire country.
And the Star asks ITV to take one for the team ahead of the England clash against Senegal. The Three Lions have only won 13% of games on the station, but 75% of games on the BBC. I love the Daily Star. What
Well,
would
that's
we
a
do
very
without it?
novel way of putting no pressure, of course, on the England team. Now ITV. Very funny.
OK, let's go into the papers now in a bit more depth. We're joined this morning by the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the journalist and playwright, Emma Burnell. Very good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Emma, let's start with you with the front of the Mail, the meet and greet that sparked a royal disaster, and it really is a disaster, not least because the Waleses have just touched down in Boston for their big Super Bowl moment.
Yeah, this was supposed to be their big outing into the world, and they are talking very much about a really nasty incident that's happened at home, an incident where I suspect, the last thing they want to be talking about this particular issue, given that it has been something that's been bubbling under for the royal family in terms of their relationship with Meghan. It just seems to be, once again, one of those things that make the royal family, rightly or wrongly, feel quite anachronistic in terms of their approach to the world and quite out of touch in terms of how you just talk to people.
Everyone who knows Susan Hussey and has worked with her says she's not racist. It was just an unfortunate and clumsy use of language.
I mean, I don't know the woman. I've never met the woman. The problem comes, and I think one of your commentators touched on it really well. where are you from? Hackney. End of story. Yeah, that's the problem, is when you keep pushing and pushing, and there are social cues that we all pick up on. You know, if you're being given an answer that's not what you're expecting, and quite clearly the other person is becoming uncomfortable, you don't keep pushing, and that's a basic social cue. Now, I mean, Susan Hussey's 82, 83, something like that. It may be that she is less adept at picking that up than she once was. I think at 82, 83, maybe you don't have a frontline role. I certainly have no intention of having a frontline role at that age. I'm going to be sat in my armchair drinking gin all night. But I just... There is a sympathy that I have for the 82-year-old woman, but I don't think that belies the sympathy that I also have for the woman who was made to feel so uncomfortable.
OK, so a bit of fence-sitting there. Yeah. Freddie, look, there's some questions about whether Ngozi Fulani... You know, whether the legitimate question or not is up for debate, but whether or not she perhaps was a troublemaker. The fact that she'd made such verbatim sort of transcript straight afterwards, but also looking back through her tweets, she has previously suggested that our current king and the Queen Consort had committed domestic violence against Meghan Markle.
I think it does.
Allegations.
It does feel a bit like she may have been sort of fishing for trouble. And she certainly caused it. But the bit of the story that I find odd is this bit that she had, her hair was brushed out of her way so that her name could be read. And this apparently was part of this assault on her that happened. I just think that sounds a bit like sort of nonsense, really. And I think the timing is the really interesting thing. Yes. Because, of course, Kate and Wills are in America. Harry and Meghan are also in America, obviously, and they're about to accept this Ripple of Hope award. And there's obviously PR wars going on. Clearly, the palace wanted to get ahead of this story because Harry and Meghan are going to be rewarded for taking on the racism within the royal family. That's what the award is going to be given for. So I think the palace are trying to say, look, we're not racist, and get this problem out off our desk, as it were.
I mean, on the hair issue, there are cultural connotations. It has long been an issue where white people have been kind of oddly fascinated by Afro-Caribbean hair and hairstyles. We've discussed it about in schools, where the braids and things have been banned for no good reason. So there are cultural connotations to just touching someone's hair without permission is actually... I mean, I've never touched your hair, for example, Isabel, and I've been on this show several times, and it's beautiful.
I've been trying. So I can't reach.
Steady. But it is unusual. It's not an action that I think you would... You know, I think just... I'm sorry, I can't see your name badge. What's your name? Is what you would expect in that circumstance.
Do you think the question was racist, Harry? Charlie?
Freddie.
It's all right.
Harry, Charlie, I think they're the royals. I think they're the royals.
I'm going to file a complaint.
You've ennobled
it.
him.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
I should have moved your hair. I should have moved your hair.
Do I think it's racist? I mean, yes. I don't think it was malicious.
No, not at all.
I think it was, you know, an old lady who's not sort of attuned to the way that people talk to each other in our day and age. But I think that it can cause offence when you ask people that sort of question. I sort of think we get hung up too much on whether things actually are or aren't racist.
It's a gift for Meghan and Harry.
It's a gift for Meghan and Harry, and it's an absolute disaster for the Waleses because, in many ways, won't Meghan feel vindicated by this? And the very fact that the Waleses were being booed at a basketball match last night, this was the last thing they wanted.
And if you look at a lot of the sort of people who talk to Meghan and Harry who have a public profile, they were very quick to jump on the story. I think there may have been something coming that the palace are trying to get ahead of because clearly Harry and Meghan are on the side of the royal family is racist and aren't we brave for taking them down? And Wills and Kate want to do climate change. So Wills and Kate can have climate change, Harry and Meghan can have racism.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Well, not a very cheerful story, Freddie, nor is the next one. Strikes every day until Christmas. That's the Telegraph splash.
It's the winter of discontent. But we've been talking about the winter of discontent for so long. We're actually in it now.
Yeah.
I mean,
I prefer now. It's the advent of
the advent
day. There's a different one.
Advent of misery. I mean, obviously, the government's response to this is the big part of the story today.
Well, it's been hopeless so far.
It's been fairly hopeless, but it's a difficult position to be in. And the cost of living crisis is what it boils down to because, of course, inflation is roaring away and all these unions want, you know, their wages to go up in line with inflation, which is just not possible. It's not fiscally possible. And I think the government is sort of hoping that actually they can inflate away quite a lot of government debt and obviously increasing public sector pay would stop that. So they're in a difficult position. I think Rishi Sunak was shrewd to focus on the impact on small businesses, particularly as small businesses were quite cross about the budget. So I think for small business to feel the government is on their side in this row is quite good politics.
And they've set up this unit, presumably at the Cabinet Office, to coordinate action, let people know where there are vacancies in hospitals. Why aren't they doing that all the time? I don't understand it.
Why aren't they doing it all the time? And people say bring in the army, but when does that happen? Will we really use the army for ambulance replacement? That'll be a very desperate move.
Yeah, army on the streets is a very disturbing sign, isn't it? Yeah. Emma, you're looking at COVID jabs.
Yeah, it's a real...
my fourth.
I haven't yet, but as soon as I can. I'm only slightly behind you, Andrew, I'm sure. But
no, much further back.
It's a real shame, isn't it? Because we led the world during the pandemic, and despite my not being a big fan of Boris Johnson or his administration, I was actually really proud, and I vocally cheered him on for that. I thought, credit where it's due. So I think it's a real shame that we've fallen so far backwards, that we didn't take that opportunity where we were world leaders and say, hey, we've found a thing that we're really good at in the UK. Why don't we invest in and continue that? And really, because I don't think in this world that we're in that these things are going to lessen. And I'm very, very much hoping we're not going to go through another pandemic, as that hopefully is a once in a lifetime, once in a century kind of event. But we are going to see a lot more complex disease, growing and multiplying and being transferred. And why aren't we proud of and really championing and really pushing being the world leaders in this? And I just think that's an extraordinary shame.
I know a lot of people who aren't going to have a fourth jab. They think they've done it now. They don't want any more needles in them. They think COVID is only going to be, at best, a bad cold or even a mild cold.
I think I'm in that. Category. I know that makes me.
Well, you're young enough not to need to worry, surely.
Well, I think the immunity is either through vaccination or through prior exposure. And if you look at China now, the big story in China is still about COVID.
Well, they're closing down cities.
They're closing down cities because the Chinese have much less exposure. So
well, that's partly because they also have an appalling vaccination rate, particularly in their older people.
And they're refusing to do Pfizer.
Yes, although they're trying to sort that out, aren't they, rapidly?
They are trying to. I mean, and China has the authoritarian system where they probably could. Yeah.
It's also virtually a police state, isn't it, really?
Right, well, listen, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to go through some more papers after that. So go and stick the kettle on and come back in just a minute.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVie.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. We are continuing to go through your Thursday morning newspapers with the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, I apologise, and journalist and playwright Emma Burnell. And we're going to go into the FT now, Freddie. You've chosen a story about Brussels and Yellen turning up the heat on Elon Musk. This is all in relation to Twitter.
Well, I think every story relates to Elon Musk in some way at the moment because, you know, the Twitter story just bubbles on and on. The European Union is concerned about Musk. And they have now threatened him with a ban unless Twitter abides by strict content moderation rules. I think this story will rumble on, and I think that the pressure on Musk to sort of abide by content moderation will be immense. And Musk's big philosophy, and this is what I like about him, is free speech. And content moderation often means shutting down views that certain people don't find acceptable. And so I think it's going to be a big clash, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
But are they applying the same rigorous standards, the EU, to Facebook and other outlets, TikTok, Instagram? I'm sure they are, aren't they?
I mean, there's around after 2016, after Brexit and Trump, there was a big feeling that sort of foreign actors were using social media, and there was some truth to it, and that was what was really wrong with the system. I don't think that actually, you know, I don't think Facebook have really changed that much. No. I think algorithmically it means shutting down comments that get Trump elected, not comments that get Joe Biden elected. And we saw that in 2020.
Yeah, of course he's back on Twitter, isn't he, Trump?
He's allowed back, he hasn't done it.
He's insisting he wants to stick with Truth Social, which is his platform.
Do you think he'll stick with that? I can't imagine he'll be able to resist the temptation.
I think he's contractually obliged to stick with it. I think that's what it is. He's invested in and employed by Truth Social, and I suspect that there's a clause that says don't go back on Twitter, because otherwise you can't imagine why he wouldn't be. I mean, he loved Twitter.
Yeah,
I mean, he was very good at it.
I'm enjoying the Kanye West Trump story at the moment. You see, Kanye West asked Trump to be his vice president.
Yeah. Fabulous. What a combination.
That guy.
Arrogant of Yay, as he's legally changed his name.
Two of the great egos.
Yeah.
Emma, you want to talk about holiday homes? This is the front of the Times. Buyers could need planning consent for a holiday home.
Yeah, it's an interesting story because it's, on the surface of it, something I'm very much in favour of. There needs to be, when we talk about building new houses, we should be talking about building new homes. We have a problem that we don't have enough homes in this country for people to live in permanently. And there is a real sense that, particularly in some sort of coastal towns, places where people like to go for holidays, far too many homes are being built for short-term lets. It's the explosion of things like Airbnb. And Airbnb used to be let out your front room or let out your flat when you go away and do some sort of house swap. And it's become a completely different business model now, where people are just building these homes that nobody ever lives in.
I always just think the argument is just sometimes unfortunate. It's sort of a bit of a false dichotomy that, you know, this is terrible, the holiday homes, but actually it's tourism, which is also important for the community. Isn't the problem actually, we need just more homes?
That's absolutely right, yeah. And where I find this interesting story, and I don't know where Freddie comes down on this, but it feels to me like what's actually happened is that Michael Gove is attempting a piece of party management. There is a big rebellion happening on the Tory backbenches around planning consent and home building numbers. And I think what he's trying to do is find a way through that, and actually a measure that is reasonable. Because, yes, tourism is very important, but you've got to have a community for that tourism to serve. And you can't price them out. That's what, and we must build a lot more homes. But there is a real sort of pushback from certain areas of the Conservative Party on the idea of building more homes and having home-buying targets.
Green Belt and near their constituency.
Yeah.
It's the classic NIMBY route.
It's the classic NIMBY route, it's very much, there are two very, very strong sides of this within the Conservative Party. It's not a sort of left-right thing. It's different tribes within the Conservatives, you know, that having different ideas about how to get to growth or how to conserve. And that's always been a tension there, I think.
And this is the headache, isn't it, I suppose, for not just for Gove, but also for Rishi, because whilst he's got to try and keep that faction of the party happy, if he then goes and appeases this other rebellion on wind farms, he then upsets the other party, and it's just ungovernable in this levelling up bill.
It's another ungovernable issue, isn't it? Yeah. Because, I mean, for 10 years now, the Tories have been talking about fixing housing.
Yeah.
And they can't do it, because you can't have a society, you can't have a property-owning democracy when young people can't really afford to own property.
No.
So obviously more housing is the obvious solution, not necessarily the solution that might work, because actually just building homes doesn't necessarily.
We asked Michael Gove on this programme, Isabel and I, last week, who said there was one poll suggesting 1 in 10 people under the age of 50 only would consider voting Tory. And I said a lot of that is because they can't get a foot on the housing ladder.
Yeah. Why would you be a capitalist if you can't get capital?
Yeah.
And also, we were talking about this on the programme yesterday, about how this is actually creating a huge brain drain, that young people are looking at what the future holds for them in the UK and think, I could actually get a better quality of life, housing overseas. It's a terrible situation.
Those immigration statistics, they actually beginning to show serious signs of a brain drain in Britain now. So that is going to be a big story.
Yeah, I agree. Right, we are going to wrap there. Actually, quick time, Freddie, to talk about this England v Senegal match and the Stars take on us. Take one for the team.
No. I feel a bit sorry for ITV. So ITV has a 13% win record with England games, which I find extraordinary, whereas the BBC has 75%. I wonder what that's all about.
Yeah.
The bad news for me is this means Gary Lineker is
doing well.
England win when Gary Lineker presents.
Yeah.
Which is bad, because I find him quite irritating.
Oh, I love Gary Lineker.
Let's hope he's not on a bonus.
As long as he does it in his pants, it's fine by me.
Yeah. No, I think, do you think we're going to beat Senegal?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm supporting England all the way.
Yeah, Isabel said that with a not great overwhelming sense of conviction.
Did you spot
because
that?
I'm going to confess, Isabel and I haven't watched a World Cup match.
I'm on team you guys.
I met the Qatari ambassador recently.
Right.
Oh.
For my sins.
Gone well for them, hasn't it?
It's gone great for...
How was he?
But he said he's
depressed.
He thinks England are going to get to the final at least, and he gave me a knowing look.
Oh.
Which I thought meant maybe they've rigged it so that England win.
Stop it! What an allegation.
Yeah, there you go. Scoop.
Yeah, well, I've got money on England winning.
I think that's a very good bet.
Bookies,
I'm just patriotic, so I'm supporting England to win.
Well, I got Switzerland in the family sweepstakes, so I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Right, well, on that note, Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell, it's been entertaining. Thank you both very much indeed for taking us through the papers. We'll have more from both of them just after 7:30. Should we stay with the football theme? We're going to talk about Costa Rica's match tonight. They're playing Germany, and it's going to be historic. Not because of the players, but actually because Stephanie Frappart... Oh, hang on, this is a tricky name.
That's why I left it for you.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know it was a bit of a phonetic one there. Nurzabak and Karen Diaz will become the first all-female refereeing team to oversee a men's World Cup match.
Yeah, and another female referee, I can pronounce this one, Sareka Griffiths, joins us now to tell us more.
Yeah, hi.
Good morning. This is a big deal.
It is a big deal, and it's fantastic just for the game of football in general, I think.
How hard is it for women to be a referee in such a male-dominated, sometimes sexist sport?
I think it can be difficult. I think it can be, you can walk onto a pitch and the first thing that people see is woman or old, for instance, or they judge you on what you are or what you look like. You don't look like what they've seen. But I think actually once you get on that field and you use everything you've learned in your training, I think it should be forgotten if you're a male or a female. You're just the referee and you're referred to as a referee on the pitch and you're given the respect regardless of if you're male or female. So, yeah.
And Sareka, it's quite interesting, isn't it? This World Cup has been plagued with criticism about a lack of diversity. You can't be gay. Women's rights are pretty damn poor in Qatar. So here you are, women will be refereeing matches for the first time in the World Cup and they won't have to wear head coverings. How significant is that?
I think the whole movement is significant. I think it's not so much about obviously there's a setting, and Qatar has all the controversy that goes with the FA Cup, the World Cup, being held in Qatar. But I think it's more about the fact that women are able to walk on that pitch to do what they're trained to do, what they do day in, day out. Stephanie Frappart is a very experienced referee. She's proven that she knows how to command a field of that calibre, and she will do that. And I would hope that after the first 10 minutes of the game, we'll stop talking about the fact that there's a female making these decisions, and just that it's the referees and that referee team who are out there making sure that this game is fairly played.
Do you get much sexist abuse from the players? Be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a fairly newly qualified referee, so I've learnt the hard way. I mean, I've only been doing it for about a year and a half. I support grassroots mainly with I've got 2 sons who are in football, so I do my very best to do as many games for them as I can. But, you know, I've got boys, so I stay in the boys' games, although I do referee female football also. But yeah, I walk on a pitch, and I think a lot of it is to do with when I first started, I would walk on as an imposter, because that's what I had grown up watching. I'd grown up watching male referees, so I also felt like a bit of an imposter in that field. So I almost had to unlearn what I had grown up seeing. But then I think very soon you kick into place your learning and think, well, actually, I'm here to do a job, and I make a very firm decision in the first 5 minutes, and everybody forgets that I'm a female on that pitch and that I'm just there to make sure the game is played safely, fairly, and it makes no difference that I'm a female or if I was a male. So, yes.
And what do your boys make of it? They must be incredibly proud, bit of a trailblazer for a mum.
They are, and they are the reason I do it. Along with they play for a lovely team, Headstone Manor, and all the parents and the coaches are all volunteer. You know, the coaches are all volunteers. They're all fantastic. So they've all pushed me into doing it. And at the beginning, I was being dragged into doing it. But what I love is that my husband absolutely hates football. So the fact that my kids actually nudged me when they were talking about needing volunteer referees. My kids didn't blink an eyelid. They'd always been refereed. They're only 9 and 11 now, but they'd only been refereed by men. But they never ever blinked an eyelid when they said, "Well, Mummy, you love football. You could do it." And I said, "No." And then I thought, well, actually, hold on. 2 boys, what kind of a message am I giving them if I'm saying no? So I decided to fully upskill, and I've been so lucky to do some fantastic things. And, you know, they love it. Although when I referee them, they usually walk off saying, "I hate the referee," because I'm very strict. So it's all gone well. So, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And I suppose, will you be watching this evening with interest and I suppose taking a sort of rooting for the referee, as it were?
Absolutely, and to be honest, I watch the referee more than I watch the game nowadays anyway, because it's such an interesting thing to watch now that I'm actually in that field myself. But yes, I'll be watching it and I'll be rooting for them. But like I said, Stephanie Frappart, very experienced. She'll have no problem at all controlling that field with her team, and I'm sure she'll brief her team. I just hope she can go out and enjoy the moment, because it's historic for her. She's inspiring a nation, just like the Lionesses over the summer, and it's just really, and you know, she won't just be inspiring young girls, it'll be young boys who'll be watching thinking, I want to do that, you know, and won't even think about the fact that it's a woman that they're looking up to. So, so fingers crossed. I think it's going to be a great match.
Oh, fantastic. Really good to get your insights. Rika Griffiths, thank you very much for getting up bright and early and talking to us about all of this morning. Thank you.
Take care.
Wow, what an amazing role model.
Fantastic. I wonder how many players she sent off.
Yeah, a few, I think.
I'm sure.
Yeah, taskmaster there.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. After that, we're talking more about the racism row surrounding comments made by Lady Hussey at a Buckingham Palace reception. First, though, here's your forecast.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a cold start out there for many of us. A frost in places, foggy for some as well, damp for others. So a mixture across the UK at the moment. But we've all got something in common, and that is a large area of high pressure extending from the east. That's mostly keeping these weather fronts at bay, but one such feature has snuck in from the west to affect Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England during the last 24 hours. Now, for Scotland and the far north of England, it is a damp and dull start to the day, the rain continuing through much of the day here. Northern Ireland, brighter skies arrive, but for much of England and Wales, dense fog patches first thing. Could be tricky on the roads, for example. The fog does slowly lift and brighter skies do emerge in the south and across Wales, where we see that happening 7 to 11 Celsius, but where we do see some stubborn fog persisting into the afternoon, 2 to 5 Celsius. It is actually a little milder for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, however, because we've got a bit more of a southerly breeze here. That breeze will push the rain into eastern Scotland, the northeast of England by the end of the night tonight. But elsewhere across the UK, a lot of cloud remains. Low cloud through central parts, some dense fog patches by dawn, and again a touch of frost in places. Now, the brightest skies first thing tomorrow will be across parts of Wales and the southwest. Northern Ireland as well, faring well for sunshine, and eventually western Scotland. The rain in the far northeast eventually peters away, so most places will see a dry Friday, and the fog in the south will also lift. I think more likely to lift compared with recent days because the breeze from the east is picking up. Now that breeze will become an increasingly dominant feature of the forecast over the next few days. It will
tend to prevent fog and frost forming at night, but it will also bring colder air this weekend. So brighter skies on Saturday and Sunday, but with a downturn in temperatures, some rain and hill snow showers.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Queen Elizabeth, Lady-in-Waiting, resigns over racist questioning, threatening to overshadow Prince William's Super Bowl moment.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Prince William's godmother, Lady Susan Hussey, she's apologised after she repeatedly asked a black guest at a Buckingham Palace reception where she was really from. A spokesperson for Prince William, who's currently in Boston for his Earthshot Prize, said it is right that Lady Hussey step down.
The Prime Minister has created a special strikes unit to tackle the wave of walkouts that could disrupt services every day until Christmas. It comes as more than 10,000 ambulance workers became the latest group to vote for industrial action.
And the government's made an emergency request to use police cells to house prisoners. It's in an attempt to alleviate jail overcrowding. The Prisons Minister blamed the surge in part on that barrister strike which took place in the summer.
And the first female referee team to preside over a men's World Cup game will debut tonight when Costa Rica played Germany. But we'll have all the latest sports for you with Paul Coyte.
So get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk and let us know where you're watching or listening to us from.
So our top story this morning, the late Queen's Lady-in-Waiting has resigned over racist questions she made to a black British woman at a Buckingham Palace reception.
Lady Susan Hussey, she's also Prince William's godmother, has apologised for the remarks.
Well, our royal reporter Cameron Walker's in Boston, where the Prince and Princess of Wales are preparing for Friday's Earthshot Prize, and he sent this report.
Well, this has turned into a bit of a headache for the royal family, particularly the Prince and Princess of Wales, who have arrived in Boston ahead of Prince William's Environmental Earthshot Prize, which is happening on Friday. But even before their plane touched down, there was controversy, and that is all because Prince William's godmother asked a British-born black domestic abuse campaigner where she really came from during a reception at Buckingham Palace. Now, the accusations were aired on Twitter, and then Buckingham Palace had to quickly, and did very quickly, release a statement saying that they take the incident extremely seriously. They have reached out to Ngozi Fulani, who is the advocate at the reception, to see if she wanted to discuss in person her experiences at that reception. Buckingham Palace went on to say the individual concerned wishes to express their profound apologies for the hearse cause and stepped away from her honorary role. Now, another indication that the royal family is taking this extremely seriously. I now understand that Prince William very much agrees that his godmother should have stepped away from her role. And Prince William's spokesperson also released a statement. Now, he said, "I was really disappointed to hear about the guest's experience at Buckingham Palace. The comments were unacceptable, and it is right the individuals have stepped aside with immediate effect." Now, despite another royal race row and the rain quite literally dampening people's spirits here, the Prince and Princess were greeted by crowds from across America. People had travelled as far as Alaska to see them, and this is what Prince William said to the crowds.
Thank you to all the hardy Bostonians braving the rain this evening. 60 years ago, President John F. Kennedy's moonshot speech laid down a challenge to American innovation and ingenuity. "We choose to go to the moon," he said, "not because it is easy, but because it is hard." It was that moonshot speech that inspired me to launch the Earthshot Prize with the aim of doing the same for climate change as President Kennedy did for the space race.
Now, today, the Prince and Princess will be visiting one of the most deprived areas of Massachusetts and meeting vulnerable young people. They'll also be seeing how Boston has become a global leader when it comes to climate change and tackling the climate crisis. And no doubt Palace aides are hoping that this one incident is the only thing that's going to distract from Prince William's Earthshot Prize.
That was Cameron Walker reporting for us there. Let's bring in former royal butler Grant Harrold, who joins us this morning. Hello to you. Look, Buckingham Palace have moved very swiftly on this. Do you know Lady Hussey yourself? Did you have experience of working with her?
Good morning. Yes, I do, from quite a young age. In fact, not only working with her, when I was a teenager, when I wrote to the Queen looking for a position, she was the lady that actually wrote back to me. So she didn't remember that, but we spoke about that, and that's kind of what we built a working relationship on. So I knew her really well.
And did you like her?
I did, and this is why, Andrew. This is why it was a bit of a surprise, obviously, to hear these comments. And as Prince William has said, it's not acceptable, regardless of who you are. But from my point of view, it was surprising, because being around her and seeing how she works, it just was out of character. And obviously, the lady in question has got the words that were used, but it's just really, for me, it's quite hard to believe that the Lady Susan would use those kind of words. But the thing is, when you're in conversation with ladies in waiting and they're speaking to guests, they do ask things like about your background. They ask, within reason, they'll kind of say where you're from and that kind of thing. But this has gone really bad, and I don't know why that's happened, which is why the palace is very quickly and thankfully kind of acted upon it.
The woman felt she was being interrogated, and that she's entitled to that feeling. But what surprises me too, Grant, having covered the royal beat for 10, 11, 12 years for the Telegraph and the Times, I often saw the Queen on walkabout, who was always just a few steps at the side of the Queen. It was Lady Susan Hussey who would go and talk to people, find out who they are, so that when the Queen met them, she'd know exactly who they were. So she was one of the most trusted confidants in the Queen's circle.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Andrew. This is what I witnessed as well. This is exactly what they would do, and I think that's what people don't. Maybe some people who've not been in the palace don't understand that part, that when they go around ahead of especially when it was the Queen with Lady Susan, they would ask questions just to get a background. As I said, I don't quite know how this has gone so badly wrong, and it really has gone badly wrong. I mean, from my point of view, and obviously this is just probably a really silly example, but I often, especially when I was working at the palace, people would kind of come up to me and say, "Oh, you know, where are you from?" And I would say, "Oh, I'm based in the Cotswolds." And they say, no, your accent, you know, where you're from. And then, of course, "Oh, yes, my family are from Scotland." So that it was quite common, you know, really common. And as we said, you know, to kind of ask somebody about where they're from, their background, not unusual at all. It's just, I don't quite understand how this is, because the other thing is Lady Susan has been doing this for decades. Yeah. She hasn't been doing this for 5 minutes. And I could understand things can go wrong if you're quite new in a position, but this is a lady that's very well experienced, which is why I'm so confused.
Yeah. Can I ask, Petronella Wyatt was speaking quite widely on this yesterday. She, like you, has known Lady Hussey for decades and says she's a wonderful lady. She says she's not a racist. She actually believes that her life has been ruined by this, that forever her name will be associated with racism. And she thinks that the palace should have stood by her and was acting too swiftly to dismiss her. What's your view on that?
It's a really difficult one. I totally agree with her. It will have, I mean, of course it's going to be so difficult for her because, I mean, I often talk about my time with the royal family. I talk about as a child writing to the Queen. I've often mentioned about Lady Susan Hussey. In fact, in recent weeks, she's sent me her best wishes because she's aware that this is part of kind of, you know, part of my ambition to work for the royal family. But now, I think, you know, obviously when you mention her name, for certainly at this moment in time, this is what people will bring up. And it's difficult. I think it is difficult for the palace because, yes, they have to act upon this kind of thing because, you know, let's be realistic, we're all aware that racism does exist and sometimes it's not always seen with many things. So it's great that obviously they act upon it and show the country and the world the royal family are not racist and they will do everything to stop it. But at the same time, as you said, they very quickly acted upon it. And I think, am I right in saying there's going to be an investigation, or they've reached out to the lady in question to obviously get, because this is the other thing. I thought this was somehow a recorded transcript where I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these are obviously her notes. Now, I'm sure her notes, I'm not saying they're not accurate, but, you know, it's difficult without someone being there and actually listening in. And I'm hoping that there are other people around that will be able to kind of draw light on it, just to get total clarity for both, you know, not just for Lady Susan, but for the lady in question, because I'm sure what should have been a wonderful event for her has been quite a traumatic time.
Although Lady Susan hasn't denied it in any way and has apologised, hasn't she? Which suggests she doesn't question the narrative at all.
But Grant, can I ask you, though, this is a woman of 83, she's a widow, she's been doing this job unpaid for 62 years. Frankly, it's her life. Are you worried about her now?
Sorry, what was that, Andrew?
I say, are you worried about her? How she'll cope? This is such a big blow.
Yes, because funny you should mention that. Last night I was obviously thinking about it when I read it, and because of her age, I'm lucky enough that I know a few of the Queen's friends who are all now in their 80s and 90s, and they've lost, you know, their best friend, if I can say that as well, not just their boss, their best friend. They are, you know, some of them are widowed. In fact, I think most of them that I know are widowed. It's the winter years. It's just really sad that for Lady Susan this has happened. And yes, I think it really will affect her. I think it's, you know, it's going to absolutely devastate her, and she's now withdrawn from that role that she loved and has dedicated her life to. And I think it is sad. But as I said at the beginning, you know, Prince Andrew's comments that, you know, this kind of, with something like this, they have to act upon it. And it's just really unfortunate. And I hope with the investigation that, you know, that some clarity does come out for everybody involved.
Yeah, and finally, do you think it risks overshadowing the Wales's Earthshot trip to the States? And what do you think the feelings of the Prince of Wales specifically will be, given the timing of this Ripple of Hope award that his brother is set to be receiving next week for challenging structural racism within the royal family?
It's the worst timing, but these things, of course, are never planned. You know, timing, that's how it, as we all know, that's how it is. I feel also Prince William is his godmother. I'm aware that the Prince of Wales and the King also had a very close relationship with Lady Susan. And will it overshadow? Well, we're talking about it now. Instead of talking about the beginning of this amazing trip, which we are, of course, doing at the same time, but this has overshadowed it, and it depends on what happens over the next week or so as to how much that continues to overshadow it. But it's always going to be a talking point, and sadly that's the reality of when some of this happens.
OK, Grant Harrold, really good to get your insight there. Thank you very much indeed. I see you join us
Thank
from
you.
Highgrove Estate. I don't know if you've even had contact with the King throughout all of this, but I wouldn't dare to ask you that. Thank you very much indeed. Now let's move on to politics, shall we? Something a little bit less controversial.
Yes.
Prime Minister's created a so-called Winter of Discontent unit to coordinate the government's response to a series of strikes that could disrupt services every day until Christmas.
It's maddening, isn't it? It comes as more than 10,000 ambulance workers become the latest group to vote for industrial action.
Well, let's speak to the former aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Leon Emirali. Good morning to you. The Prime Minister has acted to set up this unit now to try and coordinate the government's response to what is, quite frankly, a widespread, coordinated series of strikes now. What difference will this make being headed up by the Cabinet Office under Oliver Letwin?
Well, hopefully it's an opportunity to... Oliver Dowden, yes.
Muddle those two.
You're not the only one, Isabel. I think that, there is an opportunity here for the Cabinet Office to coordinate across government departments where there's gaps, where there's capacity, and sort of getting the machinery of government working together so they can try and, stave off some of the disruption we're likely to see because of these strikes. But it's a very difficult job, and I think Oliver Dowden's got his work cut out.
They've been talking endlessly, to the point of distraction about bringing in legislation. They've got a majority of nearly 80, which would then require companies like rail companies to provide a minimum level of service. They've still not done it. I can't understand. Why haven't they?
Well, it's so contentious. I mean, we know Labour are going to push back against that strongly.
Clear blue water between the Tories and Labour. We're trying to get people back to work. We're trying to stop the strikers. And Labour support the strikers.
Well, exactly. And I think, that is the political situation that Keir Starmer finds himself in. He's always very reluctant to be seen on the picket line because for hard-working people who want to get the train or who need the health service or whatever it might be, he isn't going to be seen as being on the side of the strikers because it isn't popular amongst the country. But it is political contention and they need to do something to stop this disruption from ruining Christmas.
And can they do something? Because, it seems as though the unions have really identified that this is a government under pressure from very many angles at the moment. They are weakened, I suppose, in many ways. And they are in a strong position, the unions.
They're in a very strong position, and I think that's part of the reason why they're all going at once. And I do think that we need to see courage from ministers to essentially stand up to these union bosses and say, look, get behind us, what we're trying to do for this country. It's going to be difficult for the next 2 years, but you lot are making it worse by striking and by stymieing growth in this country. If you do get behind us and we can grow our economy, then we can all get the pay rises we want.
On the day the strikes were announced, there was not a whistle, not a word of protest from government ministers, because Rishi Sunak has decreed that government ministers will not go out on media rounds every day, even though Labour are out every day. He wants them to concentrate on the job, get involved in their job. So there was nothing from the government for 2 or 3 days. An own goal, isn't it? Another one?
Yeah, it is, and I think the government need to show leadership here because people are worried. They're worried for the trivial, how's my Christmas presents going to arrive if Royal Mail on strike? But they're also worried about the very serious. What if I get ill? What if my loved one gets ill? When ambulance workers can't take me to a hospital? And I do think the government need to show distinct leadership to show there is a plan, number one, to get out of, the disruption that the unions have caused, and number two, to stop this from happening over and over again.
Meanwhile, last week, you and I were discussing the optics of MPs being able to charge their Christmas parties to the taxpayer. And today we learn MPs will be getting a pay rise. So this is terrible timing.
It's awful timing. And it seems every week we've got a new story about MPs, fluffing their own collars. And I do think that there is an optics issue here. And ultimately, MPs don't have a say in what they expense or how much they get paid. But they need to take a stand publicly and say it isn't right for us to take a pay rise at a time when the rest of the country isn't. And I think that's, again, leadership we need to see from the very top of politics.
How many of them do you think will say, not me, I'm not taking the pay rise?
All of them. All of them, Andrew. I mean, you'll see it. You'll see the Instagram post, the Twitter post. I'm not taking it because it isn't fair. Rightly so, but I think there needs to be a wider discussion about how MPs are paid, and that's always a can of worms.
They're paid nearly £84,000 already.
Well, we should point out this pay rise is 2.5%.
Yes, it is.
Significantly less than even, they've offered, I think, nurses 4%, haven't they, which has been rejected.
That's right, but offsetting that is the fact that over the last 10 years, their pay has gone up around 20%, which is way above inflation.
Yes.
Leon Emirali, thank you very much for your take on the big political stories of the day. We always appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
At the time, 7:16. Should we bring you up to date with the rest of this morning's headlines?
A charity is warning of a homelessness emergency as a new survey suggests private renters under the threat of eviction in England increased by more than 3/4 in a year. Shelter says 5% of private renters, that's about 500,000 people, say they've had an eviction notice or been threatened with eviction in the last month.
The NHS say they've gone live with a new system to help ease the pressures on the health service. More than 40 so-called traffic control centres will help find beds faster for patients. Winter war rooms across England will use data to enable staff to divert ambulances away from hospitals at capacity to ones with space available for new patients. I did actually think that happened already. With
I know, and if it didn't happen, why didn't
it? Right.
And sad news from the world of music. Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks have led tributes to the one-of-a-kind Christine McVie following the Fleetwood Mac star's death. She was 79. Her family said she passed away peacefully yesterday after a short illness. Stevie Nicks called her my best friend in the whole world.
Now, a little bit of breaking news to bring you. Nationwide Building Society have, in the last 15 minutes or so, revealed that house price growth slowed to 4.4% last month from 7.2% in October. That is the biggest fall since June 2020.
And the average house price in November was £263,788. Property expert Russell Quirk joins us now to tell us more. Morning.
Good morning.
Is the fall or the slowdown a direct result of what happened after the ill-starred, short-lived trust budget?
There's absolutely a connection to that because that sent shockwaves through the financial markets. It resulted in gilt yields and swap rates, which of course is how fixed-rate mortgages are priced, increasing to the point that obviously some buyers started to balk at the prospect of buying a property. But I think we do need to kind of hold our nerve, frankly, because this is 1 month's numbers from one index, of which there are many. It is actually a reasonably significant monthly fall. So the monthly fall actually is 1.4%. So the average house in Britain, and kind of here's the headline, I suppose, has just lost £4,500 in value. Well, firstly, that only applies to you if you're actually going to sell, if you're actually going to go into the market. We also, I think, need to understand that no one's really tracking the value of their house month to month because nobody is in the property market really on a month-to-month investment basis. So I think we need to kind of be reasonable and circumspect when it comes to kind of isolated monthly numbers. But I think one of the biggest problems, dare I say, present company accepted, is that the media do love to bash the prospects of the property market, don't they? They like to talk about, sky-high interest rates. I don't believe that a 3% base rate or a 4.5% fixed rate mortgage, which is actually where we are, is high in historical terms.
Maybe not, but it's in the context of the cost of living crisis and everything else costing more money.
Of course, but also, what we forget is that many years ago the government introduced a thing called the MMR, which was a means of making sure that buyers were stress tested at the point of their mortgage being underwritten. So actually many of these mortgages are already factored in terms of that increase. The majority of people that are on mortgages are on fixed rates, so they're currently not affected by interest rate fluctuations. And of course, 40% of people in the UK don't have a mortgage at all. Yeah. So we need to hold our nerve, as I say, in terms of reading too much into this, because there will be headlines, I think, as a consequence of the nationwide numbers today, saying this is now going to facilitate a house price crash. That simply, in my view, in my opinion, is not going to be the case.
Would a house price crash necessarily be a bad thing?
I think it would destroy the economy, yes, because the housing market and the economy are linked in terms of sentiment. And actually, I think one of the reasons that we've seen the fall today in the nationwide numbers is because of the negative sentiment that I think has been portrayed in almost an exaggerated way over the last few weeks and months as a consequence of the Kwarteng budget. So, it is not to be seen in isolation. It does not now, in my opinion, facilitate a crash. The fundamentals around the property market, in particular what facilitates demand. So, for instance, we are a culture of home-owning wannabes. Everybody, at every age, wants to still own a home. And mortgage rates actually are not only, in my view, relatively affordable, but of course what also is underreported is the fact that interest rates on mortgages, so fixed-rate mortgages, have already started to go down significantly compared to even 4 or 5 weeks ago. During Q1 next year, because gilt yields and swap rates, which drive those fixed rate costs, have already dropped, we will see mortgages in January, February, March cheaper than they are now.
Just if the prices do go down a little, that's going to help a lot of people. You said we're a property-owning democracy. People want to get on the property. There are loads of people, age 35, still living with mum and dad.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, mum and dad's fed up with having them at home.
Well, I get that. And the average age of a first-time buyer is about that, about 34, 35. So I understand that. And of course, look, the cost of money and house prices are linked, as we know. But the sentiment around people that own their home, which is some 16 million people or whatever it is, having to see the value of their home reduce, I think we should be very, very careful about that, because if we believe and accept that your enthusiasm for all things economic, consumer spending and so on are related to the value of your home, your equity in your home, and whether that's rising or falling, I think if house prices do continue to drop, and if we talk prices down, as is my point, then if we do end up with a significant drop, I don't think that's very good for the wider economy and certainly for things like consumer spending.
Well, you're certainly not doing that. So thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Property expert Russell Quirk, not talking prices down this morning. Thank you.
Now, after the break, Paul Coit will be here bringing us all the latest sports stories and giving me my weekly education on sport after another surprising day at the World Cup. Yes, it's still going on.
Shocker.
Yeah.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVie.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back at 7:26. Still to come on the programme this morning. After 41-year-old Sam Heslop disappeared from her boyfriend's yacht last year, leaving all her possessions on board. Her family is now appealing for the police to do more to solve the case. We'll be speaking exclusively to one of her friends in around 15 minutes' time.
And the government is running out of space in jails, forcing prisoners to be housed in police cells. At 8:20, we'll tell you why.
Please do keep your thoughts coming in. Lots of you letting us know your views on this royal racism round. We'll try and reflect those just as soon as we can.
I'm breathless with excitement. There's another day of World Cup coverage ahead. Oh, yes, come on, England. Paul Coyte.
You've got money on England.
I have.
At the very least,
Not
show
much.
some energy for
I do
that.
want them to win. Paul Coyte joins us now to tell us the latest.
You're just trying to be cool and anti-football, aren't you? I can see what's going on. You love it, really.
I want Germany to be knocked out.
Oh, you're so funny.
Right.
You're just being authentically you. That's fair enough.
Yes.
There's that great line from Barry Davis, the legendary commentator, and I think that was even in the hockey, and he said, and where were the Germans? Well, quite frankly, who cares? So you never know, that may well happen in the football. Whether we get to play them, we don't know, because Germany... they do play today, but they haven't done very well so far.
Oh, good.
Which is good for you, anyway, I can say. They're going to be, although they're playing Costa Rica today, and I imagine that they will beat Costa Rica, and I imagine that Germany will go through to the knockout stage. But before we get onto that, I do want to mention that England do have that lucky mascot. Now, there's often a mascot involved, someone that's going to help them through, that they look to, that's going to give them inspiration, going to give them excitement, and that's Chesney Hawkes.
Oh, I love Chesney.
You have
Hawkes.
Chesney
I've
Hawkes?
seen him perform when I was at university.
Andrew, you're giving me those. Who is Chesney
Don't
Hawkes?
No, I have heard of
You remember the one and only?
But I think we need one of you to sing the words.
I am the one. And I can't do it without pointing my shoulder. I'll end up pointing my shoulder. I can't, because I'll put my shoulder out again. Because then it'll have to be the double. Look, the thing is with Chesney, he had one hit. One hit, the one and only, and this is back in what, 90, 89?
Why do we want him as the mascot then?
Because I still don't even know how he got the gig. So the thing is, he got the gig to do half-time for the England-Wales game. So everybody in Qatar, you think of the big half-time show, out comes Chesney Hawkes with his guitar, sings the one and only. I think he can't even fill 15 minutes with the one and only, so he's done.
It should be Elton John, because he's a big football man,
Yep.
or
Ed
Cliff Richard,
Sheeran.
because he's had 14 hit #1
Ed
records.
Sheeran, Adele. they're
Yeah.
huge.
I can't imagine Cliff doing mistletoe and wine, though, to get England
maybe
going.
not.
Maybe,
I
it's...
think Cliff takes the same view of football as me, really.
But anyway, he's had his photograph taken.
Right.
It's on the front page of The Sun.
Brilliant.
And all the players are around him, and now they're saying he's the lucky mascot, and then he can go in and do... The thing is, if he goes in and plays to them, they're going to be going, OK, oh, it's the one and only again, is it? Are we going to have that one again, or is there any more that you can play for us,
None of
Chesney?
the England team would have been born when he
Nobody,
was
I'm
number
sure,
one.
because nobody would really know. They go, who's the guy
who's that
with
guy?
the mole on his cheek
he
that does the
was
one and
a bit
only
of a
song?
has-been when I was at uni in 2001 or whatever it was.
He was actually 6 months after the hit, to be honest.
Yeah,
Bless
I
him.
have to confess, Isabel had to tell me who he was.
Really?
Yeah.
There was a film. He was actually in a film with Roger Daltrey called Buddy's Song, which is where it's from. Yeah, you see, you know Roger Daltrey.
big
But
star.
anyway,
Right, we digress.
he is going to be. So hopefully,
Yeah.
the one and only will be #1 when
So
we
we're
win the World
sorted
Cup.
for Sunday with Senegal. What about
Yes.
France-Tunisia? That was a big upset. There's been quite a few of these.
Yes. Now, France-Tunisia, it was an upset when you look at it, but France made 9 changes. So.
Why?
Well, because they're thinking about resting players, thinking we're through, we don't have to worry about getting injuries, because the thing is they've had a lot of injuries in the France side. So that's what they're worried about more than anything else. And I was talking to a French journalist from Rakib, actually, yesterday, and said, well, it's all very well, but what do you think about England? And he's saying, well, I got to tell you, we expected, because everybody watches the Premier League, that England would play like we see the Premier League. But when we watch England, we're very bored from what we see.
Oh.
Which is interesting. So the Premier League style of football is slightly different from the way we play national.
People playing in the Premier League aren't English.
That's an extremely good point. but it is. But it's still
There's
based
a
here.
very serious football
pretty
point
much
from me.
everyone
It was an excellent football point.
Yeah.
Very well made.
True though, isn't it?
It is absolutely true.
Could be sports editor.
No.
It is absolutely
Please,
true.
I'm not seeking a new job.
OK. Well, look, Australia are through, which is great. We're the Socceroos. It's the first time for years, about 12 years, they've qualified. They beat Denmark, who were terrible. France then, so we know they're through. Saudi Arabia. Now, it's an interesting one as well from last night. Saudi Arabia 1, Mexico 2, Poland 0, Argentina 2. Now, it got to the point right towards the end of these games, because they're playing them at the same time, that both Mexico and Poland were not, so they couldn't separate them. So they there was a point where they had the same points, they had the same goal difference, they'd scored the same amount of goals, so the only way to separate them would be by the fair play rule. So whoever's got the least amount of yellow cards would then go through. So that was how that was. Now, at that point, if Mexico had then picked up 2 yellow cards, because they're thinking, Poland had, they'd be saying, don't tackle this, don't, you just be very, very careful. It would have then gone to pulling straws. So a World Cup qualification would have gone to FIFA. So you can imagine Gianni Infantino say, today I feel lucky, because he'll be getting calls from the Polish FA and the Mexican FA to say, well, would you pull out?
Do you know what? I think drawing straws might be more interesting than some of them.
Oh, now that is so untrue. Now that's it. Like, honestly, if I could storm out right now, I would.
We don't mind. Storming out of the studio is very good for ratings.
In a huff.
Very good for ratings.
But then I'd make the most of it and I keep walking behind.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got some good games, and also we've got to look forward to England at the weekend, which is, of course, Senegal.
Yeah, and what's all this about ITV versus BBC and the success of the England team based on which channel's airing it?
It's a bizarre one. I think BBC have 75% win rate when they show the games, whereas ITV have 25% win rate. So I imagine possibly this would be fueled by the BBC to say, well, I think it would be a good idea if Auntie got to show the game instead of ITV.
And are we going to beat Senegal?
Yes, we will beat Senegal.
That's my
Comfortably?
man.
I don't think anything is comfortably whenever England's concerned, but I think, yes, we will beat Senegal, and then, should we get to the next round, then it looks like it could be France, and then that really will be something else.
Are we out then?
Not necessarily. Much more nervous, but the thing is, it's all about momentum. It's a very boring thing to say about tournament football, but that's what it's about. It's about building momentum, and that's what we've always done. When we've had moderate success, when we've had huge success in '66, when we got to the final of the Euros, semi-final of the World Cup, it's all about building. Start slowly, build, 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 build. And so when Argentina get beaten by Saudi Arabia in the first game, doesn't really mean anything, because it's just that first game, and it's all about that momentum.
I just had a sobering thought. I'm probably the only person in this building who was alive when we won the World Cup in 1966.
Yeah.
Sobering thought. You clearly weren't.
I clearly, obviously, wasn't.
No comment.
Why? I wasn't. No, I believe
it
was very close.
I believe you. I was just saying no comment to you. I didn't want to make you feel bad. Anyway, Paul, always a pleasure. Never a
Always
chore.
a pleasure.
More football
Thank
from
you.
I'm sure very soon.
Thank you
we're
for
going
not
to take
storming
it.
that.
Great. Thank you
I'll
for
storm out
sticking
now.
with us. We're going to come back with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory.
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Welcome back at 7:38. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with me, Isabel Webster, and with Andrew Pearce. Let's bring you up to date with the front pages this morning.
Well, my newspaper, The Mail, focuses on that royal racism row, calling it the meet and greet that sparked a royal disaster.
Here's the Express. They say Prince William has condemned his godmother's comments, calling them unacceptable.
And The Times also covers the story and pays tribute as well to the death of Fleetwood Mac's Christine McVie.
The Star asks ITV to take one for the team ahead of England's clash against Senegal on Sunday. The Three Lions have only won 13% of games on the station, but 75% on the Beeb.
We love this bit of the programme. It's when we go inside the papers. Joining us this morning is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and journalist and playwright Emma Burnell. Emma, water firms in foreign hands. Why is this going to infuriate me?
I mean, it's going to infuriate us all, isn't it? When, 30 years ago, when the water firms were privatised, the vision was that we would turn into similar to America, where everyone became a small shareholder. And we all started playing the market, and everyone would have a stake in these companies. And that just...
We have a problem with your mic, Emma. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt. You keep talking, and I'll sort you out.
I'm going to praise The Guardian.
Go on.
Not often I get a chance to do this. I think this is a really big story, and it's something that The Guardian has done quite a lot of good work.
Thank you very much.
Because I think it is absurd the way that our essential infrastructure is owned by companies that are very hard to locate. I mean, The Guardian has done quite an extensive investigation.
Absolutely.
But I think I'm right here, Freddie, in that when there was a golden share in all those water companies, and Blair's government lifted it under pressure from the EU that said you're breaching EU competition laws if you don't allow EU companies to be in the market potentially to bid for them. So it's on his watch this happened.
Your memory is better than mine. I think that's right. But it's all Australia.
Yeah.
Well, it's Abu Dhabi in China. Thames Water is owned 7% by Abu Dhabi Investment Company.
Yeah.
China owns 6-point-something%. And these are not people we want to necessarily be in hop to. We cannot live without water. And certainly we've seen over this last year, they're not running them well.
So it's not like we're getting value for these people owning these shareholding companies. So I think it really is going to be an increasingly big story as water companies are failing and failing increasingly, and we're not regulating them properly, and they're not even... The profits for them are not coming back into the UK.
And, you know, I was completely infuriated. I got a text from Thames Water the other day saying, well done, you've been saving so much water, we've now lifted the hosepipe ban. And I thought, hang on, you lot lose 25% of our water every year because they don't plug the leaks.
And it's December. There should not be a hosepipe ban.
Exactly. And how much flipping rain have we had, for God's sake?
No, if we had an infrastructure that worked, this would not be necessary in August, never mind I presume you got the text in November, but even so...
Yeah.
I mean, I've certainly not noticed it not being particularly rainy.
No, absolutely right. It's been torrential, certainly in September, not least. Freddie, can we talk about the Times? They are quoting the Bank of England, was it yesterday? Brexit to blame for Britain's weak economy?
It's not the Bank of England. It is the Bank of England. Chief Economist of the Bank of England, one story. There's two Times stories here. Blame Brexit for Britain's weak economy, says Bank, and right next to it, on page 6 of the Times, leaving EU adds £200 to food bills. What strikes me about both of these stories is that it is impossible to disentangle the impact of Brexit from the impact of the pandemic. And so all of these things are sort of casting around in darkness, really. Yeah. And there's obviously a great appetite to blame Brexit, and I'm not saying that Brexit has not caused some harm to the economy. I think everybody knew that it would. But really, the story underneath these stories is that we just don't know to what extent the labour market problems are to do with Brexit.
As I understand it, the £200 on food bills is not about the labour market. It's about the additional red tape that comes because we have the friction. Exactly, we now have friction-full borders. So I believe that's where that £210 calculations come from. That's from the LSE. I mean, I think there are different stories here. There's a question of, can we be realistic and honest about the fact that Brexit, whether you were for or against it, there were going to be negatives, there were going to be positives. I'm very much a Remainer. I wish we hadn't left, but we have. And now we have to do what we can to make the best of that situation. But I know that there are going to be some things we can do that we couldn't do before. And it's fair for me to say that. I think it would be equally fair for those who got what they wanted to say, yes, of course, there are some negatives and here's how we're going to deal with those. The problem is our debate is too often just, you're anti-Brexit, you want to reverse Brexit, rather than you want to deal with the realistic consequences of Brexit. And I think we've got to take the debate to that place now.
Well, I mean, the Chancellor, in fairness to him, started to hint that he wanted to look at ways of getting rid of some of that friction and a closer relationship without sort of alignment with the European Union. And it inflamed the row, blew it back open, and it's obviously too soon to have that conversation.
We're going to be rowing about it for the rest of our lives. I mean, I think that's a fact. I do think I quite agree with them that we need to be more honest about it. But when we say we need to be honest about migration, because a lot of people talk about Brexit as though it caused this enormous dip in migration and skilled migration. It actually didn't. I mean, statistics just don't back that up. It did from the EU, but actually we're getting a lot more skilled migrants from abroad now than we ever have before. So we need to be sort of honest about what is actually going on.
And you know what doesn't help this Brexit-Remain argument, which you're talking about there, Emma? People like Michael Heseltine just sent out an email. I was the proud recipient of it the other day, saying, I do not believe Brexit is irreversible. I thought, oh, God, you're fighting a long battle, Lord Heseltine. Been there, done it.
In 20 years' time, we may decide that we want something different. At the moment, I think... I get very cross with the FBPE Twitter crowd who just think we can go straight back in as if that nothing had changed. And I don't think the Europeans want that any more than that is politically feasible in the British system. So I think that while there are an increasing majority of people who may think that Brexit was a mistake, that doesn't mean that you can reverse that mistake and everything. It's Bobby Ewing in the shower all over again.
Yeah. Just had a vision of Michael Heseltine in the show. Not good, I have to tell you.
Too early, Andrew.
Only hour of the day, yes.
Thinking about Remain as he scrubs.
Got a great head of hair, I've got to tell you. Freddie, just for that last story on the list, what are these creepy, disturbing adverts?
This is such a weird story. What I find amazing about the story is it just shows how weird the fashion industry is.
Yes.
That they did this campaign, and it wasn't just this campaign, they've been doing campaigns for years that have really perverted and odd messages And I know you can tell what they were thinking. They're thinking we're being edgy, and if we caught a bit of controversy, that's good, because that shows that we're an edgy brand. But, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the pictures, you probably don't want to, but they are shocking. I mean, the bit that really gets it is the document underneath the handbag. Do you know about that?
No.
Which is the Supreme Court decision coming down in favour of something that seemed to be child pornography. So it's sort of obvious messaging about child pornography and sort of obvious sort of winking at a sort of paedophilic culture.
And what fashion house is it?
Balenciaga.
Right.
Yes.
I know it well.
Yes, so, the iconic image of Kim Kardashian at the Met Ball in New York, when she had a face mask and you couldn't see her face for the first time. That was Balenciaga, and she's pretty much dressed herself head to toe in Balenciaga for the last year or so since she split up with Ye, as he likes to be now known. And she's a huge part of their branding, really, now. And she's been dragged into this whole row because she has failed to disassociate herself properly, a lot of people have said. I mean, is there any way back for Balenciaga, given these images of children with teddy bears covered in bondage and whatever?
I mean, I'm slightly reminded of Ratner's in some ways. There are where you can take your brand so far and then you can trash it. And eventually what happens is the brand... I mean, I imagine the money and the talent and the people who make the fashion of Balenciaga will go somewhere. I'm not sure the brand itself comes back from this. And I do think there is a wider question here. I'm as libertine as they come. As much as that's as much as I'm going to say at this time in the morning. But you've got to be... There's a conscious difference between saying we as adults can wear what we want and behave as we want and, enjoy what we want, and sexualising children. Yeah. And that is a difference. And again, and I also want to say there's a difference between sexualising children, which this very much was, and properly educating children about sexual reproduction, sexual boundaries, understanding consent, which I think I'm all in favour of. I think good sexual education is very important. This is the opposite of good sexual education. This is just using children as sexual imagery.
As devil's advocate, very briefly, does this just mean they generate more worldwide sales because of the controversy, or does it cause them real problems? I don't think... I mean, I don't really understand how high fashion advertising works. I think that's fairly obvious. But... I don't... Who's going to go out and go, you know what, I really want to buy the brand that had the kid with the porn teddy?
Yeah. I think it has... It's definitely blown up in their faces, but I do think there'll be some people within there thinking, no, this is cool, this is edgy, this is good for our brand, because that's the way they think. But I think Kanye West should make it part of his 2024 campaign to denounce them.
Do you buy their brands?
I've never bought... It's amazingly expensive.
It's obscene,
and
but
it's
they do the most amazing shoulder pad blazers for ladies. It's my dream to own one of their blazers, but they're about 4 or 5K, so I haven't indulged just yet, but I'm going after
an ethical company will do it.
Expensive. Listen, Freddie Gray, Emma Burnett, we'll have more from both of you just after 8:30, but we have to move on. Thank you very much indeed. Really, really shocking story we want to talk about now. A 41-year-old British woman, Sam Heslop, we all know went missing from her boyfriend's catamaran in the US Virgin Islands. You might remember this. This was happening last year on Monday, March the 8th, 2021.
Now, Sam's boyfriend was the last person to see her before she vanished, leaving all her possessions, including her phone, on board that catamaran. He reported her missing at 2:30 a.m. local time, but it was a further 9 hours before he called the Coast Guard.
Well, her parents have requested full access to the CCTV recording and implored the US Virgin Islands Police Force to do more, including questioning her boyfriend. Well, we can speak to one of Sam's friends now, Kate Owen, who joins us on the line. Kate, the first thing I want to ask is why on earth haven't they insisted on questioning the boyfriend? Presumably he's a prime suspect. I mean, I read that he's refused the invitation. Who gets to refuse an invitation?
Yeah, good morning. This is the difficult thing. It's understanding American laws in relation to UK laws that we've all grown up around. Apparently, you can exercise the 4th and 5th Amendment over there, and that allows him to protect himself, basically. He didn't have to go in for questioning on advice of his lawyer. And these are things that we're still having to ask ourselves as to why he hasn't been questioned. The boat hasn't been forensically searched. We just really want the UK forces to get involved with this. They're willing to. Unfortunately, over there also the US Virgin Islands police have to invite other police forces to join the investigation, and so far they're not doing that.
Really shocking case. And has there been much involvement from the British consulate as well?
I'm not actually sure on things like that. I'm more the other side of more information on Sam, and I've also met Ryan and spent time with them. But yeah, we have a big group, and there's people appointed in the group to do different things like that.
Sure. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about Ryan? How long had they been together, and did you like him? What sort of relationship was it?
When I first met him, I thought he was lovely. He was charming, charismatic, really outgoing and fun to be around. And I thought, yeah, he suited Sam really well. They were together for a few months. I met him several times. They spent time with me and my partner as well. And we really liked him. There was no concern whatsoever. When she said she was going back to work with him on his boat, we actually encouraged her to do that.
What do you think now? What is it? 18 months since your friend disappeared.
It's difficult to say. Obviously, she's in our thoughts daily. My mind changes daily. It goes from horrific, really dark thoughts of what could have happened, which you obviously don't want to think about, up until, you know, she could have fallen off that boat. The events that would have happened to her, fallen off with no noise, not being able to raise an alarm. The other boats that were very close by didn't hear anything. It's not impossible, but it's very, very unlikely that she fell off that boat that night.
I was going to say, I think you got one of the last messages from her. She was in the bar.
I did.
Before she went missing. Did that text suggest that she was happy?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I messaged her to see how the first charter had gone. And yeah, she seemed fine. She was sat, they'd finished the charters, they'd gone for a drink, they were sat in the bar, they were seen by other friends as well. They seemed to be, you know, just chilling after a day's work and really fun. She sounded absolutely fine, yeah.
Sam's parents have been out to the BVI, spoken to the police there. They showed CCTV of the couple leaving the bar that they'd been in that night, but that CCTV stopped short of them boarding the yacht. And the family have asked, haven't they, to see that in its entirety. What's been the response of the police, and why do you think they won't share that fully?
Yeah, this is a strange one. So her parents were shown the CCTV footage when they visited the Virgin Islands. And then, according to her mum, the police officer, she stood up and stopped the tape at the end. And then, but we're not actually sure it was the end of the tape. They're not clear on the time stamp and the date of it. We don't know if it definitely was Sam's last movements. We've been told it is. It was them walking along a promenade towards their dinghy, the dinghy they would have got in to take them back to the boat. But so we've asked for that to be released because we think it's important that there might be some answers on that CCTV. We know over here that, you know, cases of missing people, when the CCTV footage is viewed by millions of people, things can be resolved. They won't release the footage. They say it's on part of an ongoing investigation. So we're now asking, what is the ongoing investigation that you're doing? And we're just getting no communication from the police at all.
And where is Ryan? What is he doing now?
We believe he's in Grenada. People are keeping an eye on him. The sailing community is a big community and we all look after each other. So obviously we were out there for a long time. A lot of people met Sam. We do get updates of where he is. Last we heard Grenada, we don't know what he's doing for work. We believe his boat is up for sale, but he's blocked me. He doesn't talk to me anymore. We did have conversation for a while afterwards, but I can't reach him by phone. He doesn't answer my messages, and he's blocked me on Facebook, along with Sam's mother as well.
There is no evidence to suggest, as you say, at this point, that he was responsible in any way for the disappearance of Sam Helsop, and we have reached out to try and give him his opportunity to give his version of events. But I just wondered, did you reach out to him? Have you spoken to him since your friend disappeared?
Yeah, absolutely. I had conversation with Ryan a lot at the beginning. He answered the phone to me all the time, and I was concerned for him as well. He sounded absolutely devastated. It's when some of the questions weren't being answered, or he just seemed very deflated rather than desperate to find her, that I started questioning, you know, maybe not all as it seems, but her friends and family have always been very careful to not accuse Ryan of anything because we don't actually know. But where he then stopped communication with us, it's just made us, you know, more suspicious that something did happen, that we're not being told the full story.
Lots of questions clearly remain unanswered. Kate Owen, really good to get your take on all of this. Thank you very much for talking to us. And we are sorry for, obviously we don't know what's happened to Sam. She could be somewhere, but for her disappearance.
Thank you.
Well, we'll have more on the resignation of the late Queen's Lady-in-Waiting after this short break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Queen Elizabeth's lady-in-waiting resigns over racist questioning, threatening to overshadow Prince William's so-called Super Bowl moment.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster, Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Prince William's godmother, Lady Susan Hussey, has apologised after she repeatedly asked a black guest at a Buckingham Palace reception where she was really from. A spokesperson for Prince William, who's currently in Boston for his Earthshot Prize, said it is right that Lady Hussey stepped down.
And the Prime Minister's created a special strikes unit to tackle the wave of walkouts which are disrupting services every day, I'm afraid, right up until Christmas. It comes as more than 10,000 ambulance workers become the latest group to vote for industrial action.
The government has made an emergency request to use police cells to house prisoners in an attempt to alleviate jail overcrowding. The Prisons Minister blamed the surge in part on the barristers' strikes in the summer.
And as the classic Christmas rom-com Love Actually turns 20, I'm so excited about this.
Yes.
We're going to speak to the actress Martine McCutcheon about her memories from the movies as the cast reunite for a one-off special.
Film.
Great film.
Just such a good feel-good, gets you in the Christmas spirit. Look, we are the People's Channel. We want to hear your views throughout the course of the programme. Get in touch on Twitter or on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and let us know where you're watching from. Lots of views have come in this morning on a whole range of topics. Some on strikes. Robin saying there should be a freeze on any public servant salary above twice the average UK salary for a minimum of 2 years.
Yeah, and Rick says public sector workers are striking simply to demand a pay rise in line with the decision to raise benefits by 10%. Why should people that go to work be treated any differently?
Colin says poor people don't care about train strikes. It's many years since they could afford to travel by train. Train drivers get over £1,000 per week in wages, whilst many pensioners get around 30% of that figure. £1,000 per week? Not sure.
Well, they're on 50, no, it's a month. It's 59.
Right.
No, it's 59,000 a year there.
Right, OK.
So it is a month.
Yes, a month, yes. So a lot. It's a lot of money.
No, it is a week.
Is it?
Week,
You've done the maths there for me. Well,
Yeah.
52 weeks in a year.
Yes, exactly.
There we go. A lot of maths.
Brains of Britain at work here.
Yes, sorry for questioning that. Anyway, keep your views coming in. Right, our top story this morning. The Prince and Princess of Wales have moved to distance themselves from a racism row involving Prince William's godmother that could overshadow their trip to the US.
Lady Susan Hussey, she's 83, who was the late Queen's lady-in-waiting, resigned yesterday over racist questions she made to a black British woman at a Buckingham Palace reception last week.
Well, our royal reporter Cameron Walker is in Boston, where the Princess and Prince of Wales are preparing for Friday's Earthshot Prize, and he sent us this report.
Well, this has turned into a bit of a headache for the royal family, particularly the Prince and Princess of Wales, who have arrived in Boston ahead of Prince William's Environmental Earthshot Prize, which is happening on Friday. But even before their plane touched down, there was controversy, and that is all because Prince William's godmother asked a British-born black domestic abuse campaigner where she really came from during a reception at Buckingham Palace. Now, the accusations were aired on Twitter, and then Buckingham Palace had to quickly, and did very quickly, release a statement saying that they take the incident extremely seriously. They have reached out to Ngozi Fulani, who is the advocate at the reception, to see if she wanted to discuss in person her experiences at that reception. Buckingham Palace went on to say the individual concerned wishes to express their profound apologies for the hearse cause and stepped away from her honorary role. Now, another indication that the royal family is taking this extremely seriously. I now understand that Prince William very much agrees that his godmother should have stepped away from her role. And Prince William's spokesperson also released a statement. Now, he said, "I was really disappointed to hear about the guest's experience at Buckingham Palace. The comments were unacceptable, and it is right the individuals have stepped aside with immediate effect." Now, despite another royal race row and the rain quite literally dampening people's spirits here, the Prince and Princess were greeted by crowds from across America. People had travelled as far as Alaska to see them, and this is what Prince William said to the crowds.
Thank you to all the hardy Bostonians braving the rain this evening. 60 years ago, President John F. Kennedy's moonshot speech laid down a challenge to American innovation and ingenuity. "We choose to go to the moon," he said, "not because it is easy, but because it is hard." It was that moonshot speech that inspired me to launch the Earthshot Prize, with the aim of doing the same for climate change as President Kennedy did for the space race.
Now, today, the Prince and Princess will be visiting one of the most deprived areas of Massachusetts and meeting vulnerable young people. They'll also be seeing how Boston has become a global leader when it comes to climate change and tackling the climate crisis. And no doubt Palace aides are hoping that this one incident is the only thing that's going to distract from Prince William's Earthshot Prize.
So that was Cameron Walker for us there. Look, lots of you getting in touch on this. I have to say, quite a split bag of opinions. Layla doesn't think this is racist. She said the initial question was not racist. It is the persistent grilling that is racist. Who's made to feel they don't belong in a position of power, weaker insubordination. One cannot dismiss it. No matter how old, the lady is responsible for that, not normal behaviour. She was lost into pressing for her own outcome.
Well, Roderick in Swindon, which is my hometown, of course, he says, unfortunately, phrased comments were made, badly worded comments do not make one racist. The intent of the word matters, not the words themselves. And everyone who knows Lady Susan Hussey...
I haven't got a bad word to say.
Robert Hardman, who I spoke to yesterday, who says he's very worried about this, he's the royal biographer, he says she's just not racist. Richard Kay, my colleague on the Mail, wrote a splendid piece about it today, said, I've known her for donkey's years. So she isn't racist.
She isn't racist, and her reputation is ruined forevermore now. And tragic, she's a widow, and arguably some commentators I have seen of saying the impact on her is actually worse than the impact on Ghazi Falani, who will continue to have a career and a reputation.
And of course we know that lady in particular has been very critical about the royal household, accusing, I think, Charles and Camilla of being domestic abusers of Meghan and Harry, which is a ridiculously over-the-top thing to say.
Yes, well, look, lots more views from you coming in. Marina says, no way was this racism. It was a woman in her 80s being inquisitive and clumsy in her questioning. So lots of people are saying, look, the questioning was unfortunate, but her intent was not to cause offence. But Paul says, in this case, I feel it was racist. I've just heard the whole of what was said. The woman who said it is either racist or with ill judgment. What century does she think she's living in?
Well, she's quite old. That's the point, say, at 83. Yes. And I know if my dear mum was alive, occasionally there were things she would say, Mum, you can't say that sort of thing anymore.
Well, look, let's get the view now of social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan, who joins us in the studio. Good morning to you. What's your view? Was this racist or not?
Well, I think that I've been asked many times where I'm from, and I often reply, I live in Luton, that's where my family home is, but I'm primarily of Bangladeshi origin. But I don't see that as a racially malicious line of questioning. I think that's more a form of curiosity and interest. And I think we have a current cultural environment which is quite unforgiving and quite often hostile towards older generations.
She had a very, very detailed recollection of that conversation with Lady Hussey. So detailed, you think she had a tape recorder running, and she didn't.
Well, I think that all too often for me, it's individuals who often obsess over their ethnic and racial minority identity. The moment they're asked about matters of origin and heritage, they become hardcore Brits. I'm exclusively British. So I think that, in my view, you do have individuals that have a quite confused approach when it comes to their own identity and the framing of it.
If Lady Hussey hadn't persevered with those questions, if she just left it after the first few, would this have been an issue?
Well, I think that some people who witnessed the conversation taking place, they're suggesting that it was a persistent interrogation of sorts. But I think that when you're in that kind of situation, if I was in that situation, I would just ultimately offer the view that this is where I'm from, this is where my origins are. And I think, to be honest, I'm quite proud of where I live in Britain. I'm proud of my British identity, I'm proud of my ethnic identity and my religious identity. I feel like those kind of situations, I think that a greater level of mutual understanding is needed.
Yeah. Well, look, and Ghazi Falani clearly felt it was racist. She said she felt violated by it, that the questioning was offensive and unwelcoming. And, of course, she is entitled to hold those views. But why this is such a big story, of course, is because the timing, as the royal couple, the Waleses, were just due to touch down on this big royal tour to the US for the Super Bowl moment, as it's being described. At the same time, of course, as the Sussexes about to receive their Ripple of Hope Award for tackling racism within the royal family. This appears to throw fuel on Meghan's fire, doesn't it?
I think that many people suggest that the royal family is a fundamentally racist institution. I couldn't disagree more with that. I think that the late Queen's magnificent 7-decade reign, I think that was the rock that modern Britain was built upon, if truth be told. I think that the royal family, I think the King in particular, he described Britain as a community of communities. And even though he's the head of the Church of England, he actually said he described himself as a defender of all faiths. And I think that's an incredibly inclusive mindset to have. So I think more than anything, I think the royal family it's a central part of our hyper-diverse democracy.
And the Queen, of course, and Charles in her footsteps, was an incredible champion of the Commonwealth, which is predominantly Caribbean, black African countries.
Absolutely. I think that the late Queen was our finest ever diplomat, if truth be told. I think that she really spearheaded that process, our transition from being an imperial power to being a much respected member of the post-colonial international community.
Well, let's not forget that the States is the home of the Black Lives Movement. There's a huge problem with racism within the police force, for example, in Boston. How do you think this is going to play out to an American audience? Because we already saw the Walesers being booed by a few people at a basketball match.
Well, I think that American politics at the moment is deeply polarised, especially with situations surrounding racial identity politics. I think that the Black Lives Matter movement, though, there's been a great deal of controversy surrounding the movement. I think that there's always a debate to be had in terms of how you strengthen equality of opportunity in our Western democracies. But I do think movements such as Black Lives Matter, who tend to reduce very complex forms of social and economic disadvantage, looking at it through a reductive prism of race, I don't think that's entirely helpful for the conversation either.
OK, Dr Rakib Ehsan, thank you so much for your take on this big story this morning.
Now, the Prime Minister has created a so-called Winter of Discontent unit to coordinate the government's response to a series of strikes that could disrupt services every day until Christmas. Dear God.
Yeah.
It comes as more than 10,000 ambulance workers become the latest group to vote for industrial action.
Well, let's speak to our political reporter, Olivia Utley, who joins us in the studio. What difference, then, will this task force make under the stewardship of Oliver Dowden?
Hopefully it'll mitigate the impact somewhat, but if we have strikes every day until Christmas, different sectors striking on each day, multiple sectors striking on some days, it's hard to see how the shortfall could possibly be made up. This is going to cause a massive headache for people in the UK going about their ordinary business. The strikes seem to be pretty well coordinated to cause maximum chaos. So you've got a nurses' strike in between two rail strikes. You've got people unable to get to hospital, and then when they get there, there aren't enough nurses. You've got routine appointments and surgeries actually delayed, which makes it very difficult for people to go to work, for example. We've talked before about the productivity crisis in this country, and part of that is this 7.1 million strong NHS waiting list. So that's going to be a massive problem. It's also a headache for both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. Obviously, Rishi Sunak is under huge pressure to bow to union demands, but as he keeps repeating, that's impossible because the union demands are so high, and because there are so many unions sort of working together, there's very, very hard to see any sort of wiggle room there. But then you've got Keir Starmer as well, who's being under a lot of pressure from the Prime Minister and from some of his own backbenchers to sort of get off the fence and decide what he thinks of these strikes and actually to speak out against the unions, which, of course, would be very, very difficult for him given the way that the Labour Party is structured.
Lisa Nandy, of course, who's a Labour frontbencher, she said last week, quite brave of her, I thought, that some of these public sector pay rises, in line with inflation, are simply unaffordable. Is that realism breaking out at the very top of the Labour Party? Because I've not heard Keir Starmer say that.
No, I haven't heard Keir Starmer say it either, but I've heard that in private that is pretty much what Keir Starmer thinks as well, but he just can't quite bring himself to sort of get off the fence and wind up the left of his party, who would obviously find that difficult to hear. And also, of course, it's very difficult for him to anger the trade unions, who aren't particularly supportive of a Starmer premiership
and of course,
anyway.
give his party tens of millions of pounds, of course, the trade unions.
Exactly, yes.
Meanwhile, MPs set to get a pay rise, we hear today.
Yes, MPs set to get a pay rise, which is going to wind up large swathes of the public sector in particular, who feel as though they're already paid too much to be given any more. I mean, on the other hand, there are arguments made quite often that it's now quite difficult to get MPs into Parliament. You're not getting the sort of high-quality MPs that you might want because people are just looking at it and thinking, I could make more money in a different sector, and there's so much abuse and it's so difficult to be an MP in Britain now that why would I choose that path? So that's the argument for giving MPs a pay rise. But it's obviously going to ruffle more feathers, and that's probably the last thing that politicians need.
Optically not ideal. I know you wanted to talk a little bit, whilst we've got time, about the onshore wind row that's going on and about the impact on cost that not ending the ban could have to consumers.
Yes, there's reports today that this is the looking back, really. So it said that it could cost the ban on onshore wind could cost households 800 million. That is saying that if we hadn't imposed that ban on onshore wind farms in 2016, we could have generated enough wind power to power households to the tune of £800 million. The fact that this row is still going on is very difficult, again, for Rishi Sunak. You've basically got the Conservative Party split into two factions right up to cabinet level. You've got those MPs and ministers who feel that we now must do everything in our power, whether that's fracking, whether that's onshore wind, whether that's nuclear energy. We must do everything in our power to try and reset our energy security and be able to provide our own power. And then you've got those MPs and ministers in more rural parts of the country who know that there's going to be a big constituent backlash against big, ugly wind farms, as they're thought of. So you've got, on the one side, you've got someone like Michael Gove, who's obviously a very powerful voice, and on the other side, you've got Steve Barclay, who's also a very powerful voice. So Grant Shapps at the moment is getting some sort of fudge together, but he's being asked again and again to clarify his position, and it still isn't 100% clear.
Of course, terrible irony in the last few weeks, there's been no wind.
No, that's often the problem, yeah.
Yeah, so why we're investing quite so much, can't we invest in the water? Tidal power.
The tidal barrage.
We are an island. We were not going to run it. Yeah, what happened to that? I mean, that would be more sensible, wouldn't it?
Let's find out.
Yes.
Olivia Utley, always a pleasure. Thank you.
It's 8:16. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's news.
A charity is warning of a homelessness emergency as a new survey suggests private renters under threat of eviction in England increases by more than 3/4 in a year. Shelter says 5% of private renters, around 500,000 people, say they've had an eviction notice or been threatened with eviction in the last month.
And the NHS say they've gone live with a new system to help ease pressures on the health service. More than 40 traffic control centres will help find beds faster for patients. Winter war rooms across England will use data to enable staff to divert ambulances away from hospitals at capacity to ones with space available for new patients.
Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks have led tributes to the one-of-a-kind Christine McVie following the Fleetwood Mac star death at the age of 79. Her family said she passed away peacefully yesterday following a short illness.
And after the break, we're going to tell you why the UK is running out of, guess what, prison space.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVie.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 8:22. Still to come on the programme this morning. It's been 20 years since one of the greatest Christmas films of all times, Love Actually, was released. And at 8:45, real treat for you, we are speaking to one of the stars, Martine McCutcheon.
Can't wait for that. And St Ives in Cornwall has been crowned Britain's happiest place to live. At 9:15, singer-songwriter and winner of The Voice, Molly Hocking, will tell us exactly why she likes living there.
Yeah, so let us know, where do you think is the best place to live in the UK? I was saying I'm drawn to the sea. I think somewhere by the sea, but it's not really commutable, so
No.
stuck in London.
Pray so.
Let us know your thoughts. Keep them coming in. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Now, Labour's criticised the Conservatives for what it calls a failure to address the flexible working issue.
The opposition say Tories are focusing more on internal drama than helping women back to work. Well, joining us now is the Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Thangam Debonair. Good morning to you. Just tell us a little bit about this in particular, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we're now in the situation where 100,000 women who were in work before the COVID crisis are not back at work and want to be, and they're saying the main reason they're saying is because of family responsibilities. That's a failure of the governments to work out flexible working. They put out a consultation which closed a year ago and they haven't responded. They'd have a year to get back to the public about what they're going to do about flexible working. Now that's a Tory failure, but what Labour would do is come in with flexible working from day one of someone's employment. That would mean a package of different options, such as the ability to work around school pick-up times, having more flexible arrangements about first thing in the morning when we'd also have breakfast clubs at school, and just a package of measures to make sure that people had different ways of working their lives and their work together whilst doing a great job. And that's what the Tories are failing to do. They just didn't get back to that public consultation. It's like they've given up on governing, I'm afraid.
Why do you think the Conservative Party are dragging their feet on this?
I mean, you'd have to ask them. I find it absolutely baffling, but it seems to be part of a pattern. We've had pieces of legislation dropped. We've had Rishi Sunak, who just seems to be too weak to stand up to his own backbenchers on the housing crisis, so he's dropped a piece of legislation called the Levelling Up Bill, which should have been a government's flagship piece of legislation, and that just seems to have disappeared. We've had other parts of legislation, such as the Online Safety Bill, part of the Conservatives' manifesto promises in their first Queen's speech. That's been rolled back on. All sorts of things are happening because of Rishi Sunak's weak leadership and his poor judgment in who he's appointed as ministers. That's what it looks like from where I'm sitting. It's a government that's given up on governing. I really wish, if this is what they want to do, I wish they would just move over so a Labour government who are ready and willing to govern could take over.
I'm interested talking about leadership and how they're governing. I mean, your leader, Sir Keir Starmer, yesterday choosing to dominate his questions in PMQs on the issue of private schools. Now, I know you benefited from a private school yourself, having gone to Cheltenham School for Music. Why is it, as Rishi Sunak in his own words
not
said...
Cheltenham.
Is that not correct?
Not Cheltenham School, sorry. It's a school called Cheetham School of Music. I mean, that's not really the point. The point is that the government is choosing to leave a tax giveaway on the table, which they could be spending on mental health support for young people across the country. We know we have a crisis in mental health care support. We're not trying to close down private schools or deny anybody choice. What we're trying to do is make sure that private schools are contributing fairly to helping young people who are having mental health crises and not able to get the support. A Labour government would make sure that there was mental health support in every school, and that's what we would like to do. And I think people up and down the country will know a young person who's really struggling after the last 2 years, who needs support and isn't getting it. We would like to make sure they get that support.
You say you don't want... It's not about closing private schools. It would close private schools, though, wouldn't it? Because it's going to add 20% to families' fees. Many of these families probably struggling to meet those bills. And the Treasury has estimated it could mean 90,000 kids, at least, moving from the private sector into the state sector. Where are they going to go to school?
Listen, I want a great education for every child, and I know that over the last 2 years, children in state schools, despite the very best efforts of fantastic teachers and supportive parents, did not have the levels of support that there were in private schools. And I want to make sure that every child has that great start, that great investment in their education. And unfortunately, after successive Tory governments, we've got less and less support. I know schools in my patch are really struggling to work out how they're just going to keep paying the bills this winter. Now, that's not good enough. A Labour government would make sure that there is proper mental health support for young people, would be on the side of every young person. That's the 90% of children, more than 90% of children are at a state school. Every state school has the potential to be a great state school, and that's what I'd like to see. And I'd like to see young people who are suffering from mental health crises to have that support. So we would make the choice to end the tax giveaway to private schools so that we could pay for that mental health support. It would be irresponsible of us to make a promise that we don't know how to pay for. We want to make that promise to young people that under Labour they would get mental health support, and we know how to pay for it by ending this tax giveaway.
I want to ask if you'll agree to us this morning with your colleague Lisa Nandy that these inflation-busting or even matching pay rises in the public sector causing all of these strikes is frankly unaffordable at this time. And I also want to know, will you be declining your own pay rise, which is being announced for MPs today?
Well, I haven't seen the latter piece of information. In terms of inflation-busting pay rises, it's successive Tory governments and their economic mismanagement over 12 years that have put us in this position. It's the disastrous budget of Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss that sent housing costs spiralling, adding more misery on top of an already escalating energy crisis.
That wasn't the question, to be fair. The question was, will you agree with your shadow cabinet colleague, Lisa Nandy?
Well, of course, but I mean, why are we in this situation?
You do
why
agree
are we in
with
this situation? Because of Tory economic mismanagement. Of course, it's important that we get proper pay rises for working people. I have every sympathy with anybody who is struggling to make ends meet at the moment, and that's on the Tories for failing to negotiate with unions. Over the summer, the Health Secretary just failed to meet with the trade unions, didn't come to any agreement. Grant Shapps, the previous Transport Secretary, failing to talk to the rail unions. That's where the failure lies, and the economic crisis that we've had because of successive Tory governments has caused us to be in this inflationary cycle that we're in at the moment. That's where the failure lies. And I really feel for working people who just don't know how they're going to make ends meet this winter. And I want the government to take responsibility for their part. And that is to negotiate with working people, to come up with a fair pay rise, and to make sure that they don't have any more of those economic shocks which they've inflicted on British people year after year, month after month.
Can we just be quite clear, though, so we're certain, would a Labour government, we hear what your attacks on the Tory government, would you fund in full the pay demand of the NHS workers, the nurses who want 17.6%?
We'd be negotiating with them. We would be negotiating with them. Do you know what? In 13 years of a Labour government between 1997 and
Sounds like a no.
there were no strikes.
It sounds like a no.
Why? Why were there no strikes? We'd have been negotiating with them for the last few months. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be in this position. We'd have been negotiating and working with them. We wouldn't have caused the economic crisis that the Tory government caused when they brought forward that disastrous, uncosted, unfunded mini-budget back under the Liz Truss premiership, which everyone seems to want to forget about. That it's important to be clear why we're here. Why are we here? Because of Tory economic mismanagement. A Labour government would have made different choices. We would never have had that disastrous mini-budget, which caused housing costs to spiral. That's why we're in this situation right now. And I'm placing responsibility where it belongs, which is on successive Tory chancellors and prime ministers who've left us in this mess.
Thangam Debonair, I know you have to go. Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, thank you very much indeed for making time for us this morning. So we want to know your views at home on all of those topics that we discussed this morning. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Do you agree with all of those points on private schools, on whether or not they should be supporting the strikes, how they would pay for them?
And just to be clear, on private schools, Keir Starmer went to a private school. So for the first 2 years when he was at Reigate Grammar School, it was a state school, 1976, it was made into a private school. His family thought he'd have to leave. He remained for 5 years. The state paid his fees, which are now £20,000 a year. He went to Leeds University, Oxford. He became the Director of Public Prosecutions. Would any of that happened if he'd been kicked out of that very nice private school, which is consistently in the top 50 in the country?
Well, look, let us know your views. What do you think about all of these topics? Lots of them have been coming in throughout the course of the morning. We want to talk about another really big story that started to swirl around yesterday. The Prisons Minister, under questions in Parliament yesterday, Damien Hines, told Parliament that government is running out of prison places, forcing him to ask the police for urgent use of 400 cells for male prisoners.
Crime and policing commentator Danny Shaw is here with us. Danny, this is... the Tories are blaming the strike by barristers in the summer. That's potentially a factor, because I don't think we're sending enough people to prison, would be my view. So is that the reason?
Look, I think it's a reason, Andrew. I don't think it's the main reason. I think this increase in the prison population was entirely predictable and predicted, in fact, by the Ministry of Justice. They issue forecasts every year for what the prison population is going to do. Last year, November last year, their forecast said the population was going to rise at this point to around 85,000. It's actually 2,000 less than that. It's about 83,000, just under. So they knew over a year ago that the population was going to go up. It hasn't gone up by that amount, and yet we're being told they're running out of places. They've got to commission 400 police cells to hold prisoners because they're going to run out probably by the end of the year. So I think it's bad planning. They're saying that there's been an acute and sudden surge in the number of prisoners coming in earlier this year because of the barristers' strike, more prisoners on remand rather than being bailed, delays in court cases, and then suddenly the barristers' strike stopped, court cases suddenly came on again, so there were more prisoners being sentenced. I think this was all entirely predictable and it could have been planned for. I've got to say, I think it's a failure of planning by the Ministry of Justice.
Interesting. How much do you think this is also to do with the fact that sentences have just simply got longer?
Yeah, I mean, the population is going up. That's partly because prison sentences have got longer and the government's introduced measures to ensure that the most dangerous prisoners stay in prison for a bit longer during their sentence. That's partly to do with it. The forecast is saying that the population is going to go up because you've got 20,000 more police officers. Well, you will have probably by this time next year. That means more arrests, more charges. We know, for example, the charge rate's very low and there's a lot of pressure on police to increase the charge rate and the prosecution service, and that will add to the population pressures as well. But the government's consistent line has been, we're building new prisons. We're going to supply an extra 20,000 places. They are building new prisons. One has come on stream this year, 5 Wells in Wellingborough. Another one in Leicestershire, Fosse Way, is coming on. The government must hope that they can get to spring next year when Fosse Way opens without having to commission more police cells to hold prisoners.
Of course,
That's what they'll be.
They've also closed a lot of prisons, haven't they, Danny, like Pentonville. But can I ask, I talked to some Tories about this yesterday. They said one easy way to ease the crisis in our prisons, there are currently 12% of the prison population are foreign prisoners. That's and that's a prison population of 82,000. That's nearly 10,000. Could we not just deport them? But is there an arrangement where we could do that?
There are arrangements to deport them with various countries as they come to the end of their sentence or at the end of their sentence. And successive Justice Secretaries have tried to use that measure, but they found it really, really difficult to do that. So there are some agreements with some countries.
Because human rights lawyers get involved?
It's partly to do with that. It's sometimes the returning country doesn't want to take the prisoners and so on. So there are some agreements in place, but we've been promised that they're going to, increase the number of agreements, but it just hasn't happened. But you're absolutely right. If you could deport those prisoners, that would free up places for UK nationals. Of course, that's one obvious solution. Another solution, which is, being proposed by penal reform campaigners, is that there are a number of non-violent prisoners, shouldn't necessarily be in prison. You could release them on an electronic tag, monitor them in the community, much less expensive, would free up space in the prison for the dangerous offenders who really need to be there. That's another possibility as well.
Big question, I suppose, about how sustainable Operation Safeguard is and using the police cells in this way. But we've got to wrap there. Really good to get your take on all of that. Thank you so much, Danny. Danny Shaw there.
And after the break, we're going to be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Emma Purnell, so stay with us.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast
with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Right.
Yeah, the GPs and that kind of level of middle class aren't sending the kids back to school.
Oh, we're live. I'm so sorry. We didn't get a cue there. Look, welcome back. It's 8:40. Time to go inside the newspapers. We're joined this morning by Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the journalist and playwright, Emma Burnell.
I blame you.
I blame me as well. Probably my fault. I'll take it. Shall we talk about Matt Hancock, Freddie?
Please do.
I want to talk about the story because I don't think people have talked enough about Matt Hancock.
Right.
It's been at least 24 hours.
Matt who?
But he's involved in crypto talks, apparently.
Surprisingly enough, he's got himself in trouble again. He received some money from a cryptocurrency firm, £11,000, nearly £12,000, and then about a month later was lobbying the Treasury to take cryptocurrency more seriously. So it's another Matt messes up again. But it reminded me. I used to actually organise events for The Spectator, and any time we desperately needed a minister, we would say just call on Matt, because he will just do anything.
Well, we've seen that.
So I mean, I think, obviously it's dodgy to a certain extent, but it's also just he's a plonker, and he'll just accept anything and do it. Of course, in light of the collapse of the crypto world at the moment, it's also pretty interesting.
Is he in political trouble? Because we know one of the local town councillors in his constituency passed a unanimous resolution saying he should stand down at the next election. His Conservative Association weren't given much, if any, notice that he was going into the jungle, incapable of doing his job as an MP for 3 or 4 weeks, for sure. Could he be... He's had the whip withdrawn, which means technically he can't stand as a Tory MP next time unless the whip's restored. What's going to happen to him?
His destiny is to be a celebrity.
You think so?
I think so, yeah. Well, he's going to do that SAS...
He's done it already.
He's done it.
$5 grand for it.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, because they were very angry because they filmed it before I'm a Celebrity and he wasn't supposed to do another show.
Yeah.
I'm going to bet that he wins it.
I believe that's the case.
You think he wins
Well,
it?
we spoke to Ant Middleton from the show.
Yeah, we
he
did.
said if Fern McCann can win it, then definitely Matt Hancock can. But I have a theory about the whole Matt Hancock thing, and it's unpopular with our viewers and most of the panels that we've talked to. But I think the fact that he got to the final on what is deemed in reality TV as kind of like the crown jewels of reality television, I'm a Celebrity, I think he could be an electoral winner. I think that maybe the Tories would do well, but he seems to have got down with the kids, as it were.
I mean, I think the thing about that show is, and what Matt Hancock's journey, and they love a journey on reality television. The thing is, Matt Hancock went in there as a cartoon character, basically. People didn't know him, people didn't understand him. So he got to be humanised. He got to be more 3D on that show. Now, OK, admittedly, quite a lot of that time that was 3D uncovered in rats or whatever. But, I mean... He's a Wally. I mean, never has a man's last 4 letters of a name been so appropriate. But you are always... he was always going to be humanised by that show. And I think even though some of the celebrities did challenge him, they're in an incredibly difficult situation and they have to band together. Nobody wants that camp to be constantly full of tension and argument. And so, of course, that was... He was... Has my opinion of him raised? No. But I think in general, he has humanised himself for the general public.
Don't you think he was helped also by the fact Boy George stuck his claws into him right from the word go and was pretty spiteful and nasty?
And I think Boy George was probably the worst person in the world to take a moral stance.
Right.
So, yeah.
Went to prison, let's not forget,
for
absolutely. Chaining his male escort to... He says it wasn't a radiator, but it was some implement in the house.
I'm not sure what he was chained to is the problem,
Yeah, and the bloke had to run naked out of the house, and Boy George objected when other panellists in the jungle challenged him about that, and they were entitled to ask him about it.
Could not love Matt Hancock compared to that. I like Isabel's theory. I think it might be something. He does sort of fail upwards.
Yeah.
I mean,
but he's Prime Minister by 20...
Yeah, exactly.
I think the bigger problem here is that he was using his position to lobby in a way that he shouldn't have been. And if we think about what brought Boris Johnson down, the start of that was exactly this. Someone who had been paid by a firm lobbying in an inappropriate way, and the response not being great by Boris Johnson and his government. And I think that there does need to be a real tightening of the rules around how this is done. And I suspect, because of what we do know of Matt Hancock, that this is probably just him being a bit ridiculous and enthusiastic about everything. And just going, oh, I've heard a thing. And, you know, being one of those people, the last thing he hears is the thing he's most excited about. So he's heard about cryptocurrency. He goes along and says, let's deregulate cryptocurrency. Turns out not a great idea. But that doesn't make it OK that he went to a £10,000 paid gig and then went into used his position to lobby in favour of it.
There you go. I don't know how much time we've got, but I really want to make sure we squeeze in this lettuce calendar.
Yes, I'm glad you saw that.
Shall I hold it up?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Well, here it is. It's the
Daily Star.
I mean, I'm very pleased with Daily Star. They had this big coup with the lettuce.
Yes.
Absolutely.
They don't get enough coups. And, well, here they're really milking it a little bit.
Hold that up a bit. There you go.
With a
Lettuce
calendar.
make your day.
With some truly... well done.
And how many photos is Liz Truss involved in?
She actually is in... there's only the lettuce representing Liz Truss.
That's on Christmas Day, of course.
They save the best till last.
Right.
But there's some very weird ones. It's sort of very surreal tabloid stuff.
Because they ran the lettuce on the front page every day after The Economist said she had the shelf life of a lettuce.
Yes.
And it turned out the lettuce outlasted her.
It did. It really did. I know. She's been spotted in the Commons, Freddie. Have you seen her?
The lettuce? Yes, she is apparently back. Quite how back and active she is.
I've not seen her in the Commons chamber.
She and Boris Johnson have joined allegiance.
They're rebels to a cause. They don't want onshore wind turbines.
Maybe she could...
No, they do want them,
Oh,
don't
they do want them.
Yeah.
They do want them. And Rishi doesn't.
She'll become a spokesman for a cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Do you think she goes... Does she stand down at the next election?
I think not. I think she ploughs on, because also career avenues, what
Yeah, what do you give a Prime Minister, an MP who's got now officially is the worst Prime Minister in the history of Britain and a record that will never be beaten?
Not
42 days.
Not a lot of speaking gigs.
No. And not a lot of board positions. I wouldn't put her on my board.
Is making money hand over fist.
I think she could make money at a Dalek convention because she sounds like a Dalek, and there's always demand for that.
I mean, there is the big Doctor Who convention every year in LA. I'm sure she'd make a fortune.
That's what they always say. Just go to America. Everyone wants to make more money in America.
Exactly. And she admits she's weird. She said it about herself. I know I'm weird. She is. There must be a weirdos convention she can go to.
It's true. In America, if you're Prime Minister, I mean, they're not going to know what happened when you were Prime Minister.
Fine.
I remember seeing Tony Blair do a speech in America, and none of them knew who he was.
No.
And he was horrified at this. That they didn't know how important.
How much makeup was he wearing?
Enormous amount.
Yes, it's incredible.
Like Trump, he loves a tan.
More than Trump.
Yeah.
He's almost glows orange.
And a little bit of work, possibly.
Oh, a bit more than a little.
Yeah.
Really? He's doing Botox.
And but the eyes are real and they're very fierce.
Yeah. And he's still got fire in his belly.
Yeah.
Well, and he seems to be firing back at the moment, doesn't he? He's had quite a raised profile in the last week or so.
Thoughts on how Sir Keir Starmer's doing things?
He's been advising behind the scenes, as has Gordon Brown, quite a lot of them. The old guard is back. Yeah. Tories will be pleased about that.
Well, it's on both sides. George Osborne.
No more George.
Anyway, look, we've got to wrap the papers. It's been a pleasure, as always. We love our Thursdays. Thank you so much, Emma Burnell, Freddie Gray. See you soon.
Now, the Christmas season is upon us. However, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to keep the peace in a big household gathering.
Yes, just like Love Actually's Natalie. Here's that memorable moment when the Prime Minister arrived on her doorstep.
Hello. This is my mum and my dad and my Uncle Tony and my Auntie Glyn. Very nice to meet you. And this is the Prime Minister.
Yes, we can see that, darling.
And unfortunately, we're very late.
It's the school Christmas concert, you see, David. It is the first time all the local schools have joined together, even St Basil.
Too much detail, Mum.
I love it. I love that film.
It's so charming. Is it your favourite Christmas film?
I think it is, yeah. Is it yours?
I'd probably like one of those old ones.
Oh, well, don't admit that.
Yeah, one with Jimmy Stewart in. That's quite a nice one.
OK, fair enough. Well, look, we're going to talk now to one of the stars of the show. Martine McCutcheon joins us now. We saw her in that clip. Good morning to you, Martine. Please tell us.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Do you watch it every Christmas just like we do?
Oh, no. Oh, gosh, no. My family like to watch it and I can't bear to see myself on camera. I can do it when I'm on set and I'm looking at the monitor and being constructive. And then once it's done, it's done. So, yeah, my mum's like, oh, she's on. Come on, Martine. I'm like, Mummy, you're never going to learn. I can't watch myself.
Oh, it's such a hit, though. I mean, people everywhere I know, they can go and rewatch them in cinemas at Christmas. You can go, I think, to the Hammersmith Apollo, where they've got an orchestra, live orchestra performing at the same time as it's being broadcast. People love it.
Yeah. Yeah, they really do. And it's just so lovely that here we are 20 years later since it was made, and it's just snowballed. It's just become this Christmas phenomenon that, you know, is so lovely to be a part of, and to talk to Diane Sawyer, to celebrate the 20 years. You know, I think we all knew we felt like we were part of something special, but I don't think we realised it would just be this huge still 20 years later, for sure. It's such, I still pinch myself that I was even in the film. So yeah, amazing, absolutely amazing.
Martine, is Hugh Grant a bit of a dish? Do you find him sexy?
Oh, yeah, of course. Who doesn't? You know, he's one of the biggest movie stars for a reason. And he's very humble about that. But I think, I think he's lovely. And I think that, he definitely deserves his status as the rom-com king. And he's gone on since to do some amazing dramas as well. It's great. It's a great time for him.
Well, look, Christmas is fast approaching, 1st of December now, and look, lots of people will be tuning in to watch that movie. But you want to talk this morning about trying to make sure people keep the drama strictly on screen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Christmas can be a tricky time anyway. The world's been through a lot. I think people are kind of making sure that they want to buy each other the right presents. And apparently one of the biggest fallouts that you have over Christmas is that people buy each other the wrong presents or an unthoughtful present, or there's pressure that, you know, you're supposed to, you know, not be single anymore. I know my sister's going to get that from our stepdad. Oh, yeah, again, you're on your own. But basically, I've joined up with the One for All campaign, and they have like 55,000 stores, outlets everywhere, from furniture, toys, fashion, jewellery, clothing, so that you can give a card that is an amazing gift and someone can actually get something they want and you haven't wasted your money. You don't have to do that kind of pretend you love it. Oh, love it, you know, kind of face. So, teamed up with them. And what's lovely is that even though there are all these dramas and people sometimes dread that time of being with family at Christmas, apparently most people say that they are really pleased that they did get together and they did see them, and it is ultimately all about the love.
Yeah.
Do you always spend Christmas with your family, Martine?
Yeah, I'm normally the one that hosts it. It seems to be like a running thing now that I've become like the Christmas queen, and everybody comes to us and expects us to host it. My husband cooks. I make sure that everything looks really lovely, play loads of music. We've got a big Irish background, so music's always playing, and we sing and dance, and yeah, it's a real time for us to embrace each other. And I mean, of course, we have our moments with each other and drive each other nuts like any other family. But yeah, normally, you know, it's one day where you put all of that to one side and you just cherish each other.
Oh, fantastic. I can't wait. I do love Christmas.
Are you having turkey?
Yeah, turkey and also beef. Bit of a mixture.
Okay. God, you really do all the trimmings then.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I'm just curious. Go for it. But I'm just curious, just going back to Love Actually, we've got a new Prime Minister in Number 10. Do you get invites from Number 10 ever to come in? Obviously, in the film, you were in there working. I mean, did you even get to go in at the time? Have you been inside Number 10? So many questions.
Yeah, I was myself, Richard Curtis and his other half, Emma Freud, we were invited to go to number 10 when Tony Blair was our Prime Minister. And I couldn't resist it. It said, don't sit here, but I had to sit in Winston Churchill's chair. And it was amazing. But I surprised Tony Blair and took him in tea and biscuits. He didn't know anything about it. And it was definitely a moment I won't forget, that's for sure. And it was amazing to be inside there looking at, the real history of number 10 Downing Street, thinking of all those things those walls have seen. My goodness me.
And it really does look like that staircase, doesn't it? The yellow wall with all the pictures.
Yes. Yeah, they really replicated it, like, brilliantly. I was like, wow, you guys have done the most amazing job. So, yeah, it was very, very similar to inside. Spot on.
Fantastic. Martine McCutcheon, thank you so much for joining us.
Lovely to talk to you. Really lovely to talk to you.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you so much for looking after us all every morning.
And have a lovely Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
You
Merry
too.
Christmas, yes, exactly. And we're going to have more on the resignation of Lady Susan Hussey from Buckingham Palace after this short break.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a cold start out there for many of us, a frost in places, foggy for some as well. Damp for others, so a mixture across the UK at the moment. But we've all got something in common, and that is a large area of high pressure extending from the east. That's mostly keeping these weather fronts at bay, but one such feature has snuck in from the west to affect Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England during the last 24 hours. Now, for Scotland and the far north of England, it is a damp and dull start to the day, the rain continuing through much of the day here. Northern Ireland, brighter skies arrive, but for much of England and Wales, dense fog patches first thing. Could be tricky on the roads, for example. The fog does slowly lift and brighter skies do emerge in the south and across Wales, where we see that happening 7 to 11 Celsius, but where we do see some stubborn fog persisting into the afternoon, 2 to 5 Celsius. It is actually a little milder for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, however, because we've got a bit more of a southerly breeze here. That breeze will push the rain into eastern Scotland, the northeast of England by the end of the night tonight. But elsewhere across the UK, a lot of cloud remains. Low cloud through central parts, some dense fog patches by dawn, and again a touch of frost in places. Now, the brightest skies first thing tomorrow will be across parts of Wales and the southwest. Northern Ireland as well faring well for sunshine, and eventually western Scotland. The rain in the far northeast eventually peters away, so most places will see a dry Friday, and the fog in the south will also lift. I think more likely to lift compared with recent days because the breeze from the east is picking up. Now, that breeze will become an increasingly dominant feature of the forecast over the next few days. It will tend to prevent a fog and frost forming at night, but it will also bring colder air this weekend. So brighter skies on Saturday and Sunday, but with a downturn in temperatures, some rain and hill snow showers.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Queen Elizabeth's lady-in-waiting resigns over racist questioning, threatening to overshadow Prince William's Super Bowl moment.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 9 on Thursday, the 1st of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Prince William's godmother, Lady Susan Hussey, she's apologised after she repeatedly asked a black guest at a Buckingham Palace reception where she was really from. A spokesperson for Prince William, who's currently in Boston for his Earthshot Prize, said it's right, Lady Hussey has stepped down.
The Prime Minister has created a special strikes unit to tackle the wave of walkouts that could disrupt services every day until Christmas. It comes as more than 10,000 ambulance workers become the latest group to vote for industrial action.
And the government's made an emergency request to use police cells to house prisoners. It's in an attempt to alleviate jail overcrowding. The Prisons Minister has blamed the surge in part on the barristers' strike earlier in the summer.
And it's been voted the happiest place to live in the UK. Gosh, look at that, absolutely gorgeous. We'll be transporting you to St Ives in Cornwall to find out what makes it so great. You only have to look at that and you know the answer, don't you?
You can see it, and it's mercifully not crowded like it was when I was there. Yeah. Get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk and let us know where you're watching or listening to us from.
So good morning. Our top story this hour. The Prince and Princess of Wales have moved to distance themselves from a racism row involving Prince William's godmother that could overshadow their trip to the United States.
Lady Susan Hussey was the late Queen's lady-in-waiting for 62 years. She resigned yesterday over racist comments she made to a black British woman at a Buckingham Palace reception.
Well, here's the take of our royal reporter Cameron Walker, who's in Boston, where the Prince and Princess of Wales are preparing for tomorrow's Earthshot Prize.
Well, this has turned into a bit of a headache for the royal family, particularly the Prince and Princess of Wales, who have arrived in Boston ahead of Prince William's Environmental Earthshot Prize, which is happening on Friday. But even before their plane touched down, there was controversy, and that is all because Prince William's godmother asked a British-born black domestic abuse campaigner where she really came from during a reception at Buckingham Palace. Now, the accusations were aired on Twitter, and then Buckingham Palace had to quickly, and did very quickly, release release a statement saying that they take the incident extremely seriously. They have reached out to Ngozi Fulani, who is the advocate at the reception, to see if she wanted to discuss in person her experiences at that reception. Buckingham Palace went on to say the individual concerned wishes to express their profound apologies for the hearst cause and stepped away from her honorary role. Now, another indication that the royal family is taking this extremely seriously. I now understand that Prince William very much agrees that his godmother should have stepped away from her role. And Prince William's spokesperson also released a statement. Now, he said, "I was really disappointed to hear about the guest's experience at Buckingham Palace. The comments were unacceptable, and it is right the individuals have stepped aside with immediate effect." Now, despite another royal race row and the rain quite literally dampening people's spirits here, the Prince and Princess were greeted by crowds from across America. People had travelled as far as Alaska to see them, and this is what Prince William said to the crowds.
Thank you to all the hardy Bostonians braving the rain this evening. 60 years ago, President John F. Kennedy's moonshot speech laid down a challenge to American innovation and ingenuity. "We choose to go to the moon," he said, "not because it is easy, but because it is hard." It was that moonshot speech that inspired me to launch the Earthshot Prize with the aim of doing the same for climate change as President Kennedy did for the space race.
Now, today, the Prince and Princess will be visiting one of the most deprived areas of Massachusetts and meeting vulnerable young people. They'll also be seeing how Boston has become a global leader when it comes to climate change and tackling the climate crisis. And no doubt palace aides are hoping that this one incident is the only thing that's going to distract from Prince William's Earthshot Prize.
Cameron Walker with that report for us. Well, joining us now is showbiz reporter Stephanie Tetchy. Good morning to you,
Good morning,
Stephanie.
Isabel and Andrew.
Look, the problem with all of this, of course, is that it will be gasoline on the Meghan Markle fire, if you like. She'll feel vindicated, won't she?
Definitely, because what's been happening, race relations with the royals at the moment is at an all-time low. And yesterday's incident just fuels to the fire where, Meghan made claims of an unidentified royal family member who's made, offensive remarks about Archie's skin. So yesterday's incident is just adding to how people feel that race relations with the royals at the moment is at an all-time low. I personally don't think Lady Susan should have resigned because you're not actually getting to the root of the problem of this old colonial mentality, which was quite rife when Our Majesty was alive and has been swept underneath the carpet. Now is the time when it's coming up into the forefront.
So do you think, sorry, that her questioning was a colonial mindset then, or do you think it was actually just perhaps being interested in what someone's heritage was, and it was just a clumsy questioning? What did you...
It was what I felt from it. It wasn't necessarily what she was asking. It was how she was asking it. She couldn't accept that when Ngozi said that she was black and British, and she didn't want to leave it there. She kept on pressing her. She didn't feel comfortable with her just saying, "I'm black British," and just leaving it there. I've had many situations like that in my career where I've had similar situations, and I've never actually come out and called that person a racist. I've actually just said I feel a bit uncomfortable because knowledge is power. It's saying to someone, actually, you could have asked it a bit differently. And there is that fascination because when I meet such people, they come from an old era of where, they haven't been really interacting with black people as much. So when they do meet a black person, it's that curiosity. But now in this generation where we live, where everything can go online and it turns out quite controversial, you need to come better than that.
And this woman who was in conversation with Lady Susan Hussey, there's a series of emails or tweets have come to light from before she was at the palace, where she'd effectively accused the Prince of Wales and, I think Charles and Camilla of a form of domestic violence against Meghan. Over-the-top language.
Definitely.
If we're talking about the language of Susan Hussey, I think that language is arguably more over the top.
Well, what I don't understand is why, if Ngozi felt like that, why she attended a reception there, because it doesn't align with what she stands for with Sister Space. And she did come out and say that she didn't want Lady Susan to lose her job and she didn't want her to be named and shamed. She should have then had that conversation with her privately rather than taking it to Twitter. But again, when you read that conversation, we didn't hear it, but when you read it, it actually comes across as quite offensive. I'm not going to be the spokesperson for black people, because for different black people, trauma means different things. And if in that situation she felt like she felt other that is enough to trigger a response in somebody.
Yeah, of course
of
she's
colour.
entitled to feel however she feels. But I suppose that we started by talking about the flames on the fire. The Prince and Princess of Wales really needed to have a successful overseas tour, didn't they? Because they had this disaster in Barbados. They're there for his baby, effectively his fourth child. This is his Super Bowl moment, the Earthshot Prize, the second one, the first overseas. Is it going to be overshadowed by all of this, do you think?
Totally, because it's another race row. You know, if you go on Twitter every other week, it's trending, royals are racist, you know, and it's not something that's going to die. And I think now it's time for King Charles to actually have a conversation with his institution from the top to the bottom and how we're going to handle race relations, because at the moment it's quite poor and people need something done, or every other week we're going to be talking about the same thing.
Bad luck, bad news, isn't it?
Yeah,
and Susan Hussey, 62 years at
And
Her
it's sad.
Majesty's side.
It's, you know,
what a terrible way for her career
I
to end.
personally don't think she should have resigned, because I think, again, it's like so easy to label someone racism when it's not racism. It's just a misunderstanding, and it's just going forward now. The monarchy need to think, how are we going to be handling race relations? That is the important thing.
OK, well, and Buckingham Palace have said they will be looking at it, a full investigation, and talking to staff about how they believe people should face race relations. Indeed. Stephanie Tetchy, always good to get your take on the big
Great to
stories.
see
Thank
you.
you very much.
Now the Prime Minister's created a so-called Winter of Discontent unit to coordinate the government's response to a series of strikes that will disrupt services every day until Christmas.
Comes as more than 10,000 ambulance workers become the latest group to vote for industrial action. Well, let's speak now to our political reporter, Olivia Utley, and it certainly does feel like the advent calendar of strikes, doesn't it? Which strike is it going to be today? They're taking it in turns.
Absolutely. There's a graph, I think it's in the Telegraph, which breaks down all of the strikes day by day, and on most days of December there's more than one strike, and some of these strikes feel as though they're sort of coordinated to cause the maximum possible amount of chaos, particularly the nurses' strike, which are sandwiched around a rail strike. You can just imagine the total disarray that's going to throw the country in the run-up to Christmas, particularly if it gets cold, which is obviously a trigger for lots of people to go into hospital. Could be very, very difficult for the country. Also very difficult, of course, for Rishi Sunak, who is, as far as it sounds, is trying to negotiate with these unions, but is having quite a difficult time because there are so many of them and they're demanding so much. He keeps repeating that it's just unaffordable and would cause a inflationary spiral, essentially. How on earth they're going to come to any sort of resolution, it's very, very hard to see. But his task force can't possibly make up the shortfall for all of these missing workers.
It's interesting, talking of pay, we were talking to a Labour frontbencher on the programme a little earlier. We could not get her to answer, will she or would Keir Starmer's government, yes or no, fund these pay demands?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the answer's no, unless he wants to bankrupt the country.
Well, from what I hear, Keir Starmer is pretty against these strikes and also knows that it's not really affordable, but he isn't quite coming out and saying that. Over the last few months, we have seen Keir Starmer grow quite a lot in confidence. For example, that private school row that he got into yesterday, whatever you think about the issue itself, it's quite interesting that he decided to take it on, because the Mail has been accusing Keir Starmer of class war for ages, and to decide to just sort of lean into that and go for it shows a leader of the opposition who is growing in confidence. But with this issue, he just always seems to be on the back foot. He can't say whether or not he would give in to these pay rises. He wants to show that he's a realistic prospect for Prime Minister, and if he's saying he's going to give almost everyone in the public sector a 19% pay rise, that undermines that. He also can't really say whether he supports the strikes, and you've got his senior shadow ministers on both sides of the argument pushing a lot of pressure on him, and we're not quite seeing how he's emerging out of this.
And picket lines, he's banned frontbenchers from going on picket lines, and we know one frontbencher effectively lost his job over it.
Yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if over December he isn't the last one for that to happen to, because there are plenty of Labour frontbenchers who feel as though their solidarity has got to be with the unions, and that's what the Labour Party's for, and they think that being banned from picket lines is basically treacherous. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more problems on the Labour front bench in the run-up to Christmas.
Saw a photo of Jeremy Corbyn. I know he's no longer technically in the Parliamentary Labour Party, but he's still in the Labour Party. Of course, he was on a picket line. Who with his old mate, Mick Lynch. Of course he was, from the RMT.
Friends.
Best buddies.
Right, Olivia Utley, thank you very much indeed for all of that. And let us know your thoughts at home on the topics we're covering. Will you be on a picket line, or are you fed up with the country being brought to its knees by these endless strikes? Send your thoughts into GB News and gbnews.uk. And for time at 9:13, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's news.
A charity's warning of a homeless emergency as a new survey suggests private renters under the threat of eviction in England are increasing by more than 3/4 in a year. Shelter says 5% of private renters, that's around 500,000 people, say they've had an eviction notice or been threatened with eviction in the last month.
The NHS said they've gone live with a new system to help ease the pressures on the health service. More than 40 traffic control centres will help find beds faster for patients. Winter war rooms across England will use data to enable staff to divert ambulances away from hospitals at capacity to ones with space available for new patients.
And Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks have led tributes to the one-of-a-kind Christine McVie following the Fleetwood Mac star's death at the age of 79. Her family said she passed peacefully away yesterday after a short illness. Stevie Nicks called her my best friend in the whole world. Sad.
We've been asking you all morning where your favourite place to live is. Well, we'll be finding out after the break why St Ives has topped a poll with the Voice 2018 winner, Molly Hocking, giving us her take on that. See you in a moment.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVie.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. We're going to take you to the seaside now. St Ives is one of Cornwall's most popular seaside towns and, once again, has been crowned Britain's happiest place to live.
And there was me thinking it was going to be Swindon, my hometown. Not many votes for Swindon, I'm sure.
Beautiful round there, the countryside.
Lovely, yes. St Ives has topped Rightmove's annual Happy at Home Index survey, where more than 21,000 people responded.
Questions were based on sense of belonging, community spirit and green spaces. And St Ives resident and singer Molly Hocking joins us now. Good morning to you, Molly. So tell us, why do you love St Ives?
Good morning. Well, I love St Ives because it is, well, I'm quite biased because I was born here. But generally, it's just an amazing place. It's got such a local, supportive atmosphere. Every time you wake up in the morning, all you can hear is the seagulls, no roads, no cars, just fresh air and the seagulls. And we've got everything. We've got shops, local bakers, sports clubs. I mean, do you know what I mean? What more could you want growing up?
Does the invasion of tourists, Molly, does that spoil it for you, maybe even just a little bit in the summer?
Well, I've grown up with it, so I know no different, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But since COVID, it has got rapidly busier every summer. And I'm a singer, but I still have to work. So I'm also a waitress as well. And we need it. We need the tourism to come down and spend money to grow our economy. So I just welcome everyone that I can.
Yeah, and of course there's a Tate, isn't there, in St Ives? There's a really big cultural scene, an art scene, and that draws a lot of people in. And a big foodie scene, Rick Stein kind of taking over the town as well. It's got a bit of something for everyone.
Exactly. What more could you want? Fish and chips, pasties, the Tate, you know? It's open right now, actually, for a Barbara Hepworth exhibition, which is cool. There's quite a few people down here just for that. So, yeah, this town is the most beautiful and the most happy place to live.
Is there much rivalry with the other Cornish towns?
Do you know what? I think there is, because I did look on a post this morning, because it was leaked that this was the happiest town in the UK. And all the comments, I was looking through the comments, and the comments are generally from people that live about 30 minutes away from St Ives, either for. But obviously they've grown up in their own towns. We've grown up in our own towns. But yeah, this is the happiest one.
I've got some friends who live on the south coast, not far from here in London, who talk about the DFLs, the down from Londons, and they complain about the Instagram mentality of everybody seeing these beautiful places on Instagram and suddenly they're not secrets anymore. Everybody knows about it. Do you think Instagram's a bit to blame for kind of the invasion, as you put it, of tourists to some of our favourite places?
I think social media has a lot to blame for. But I don't see it in a bad way. If there's a spot, you know, Instagram it, show it off to the world. Because I know all the little spots in St Ives where people don't ever go still, you know. So maybe I should start Instagramming them more. But no, yeah, I think tourism needs to happen in St Ives in small towns like us.
And Molly, is there a good music scene? And if so, are you the star turn?
Oh, do you know what? I love the music scene here because there's always been open mics. There's always been like country music in the pubs. But recently it's just had this massive bloom of amazing talent. And the talent that you get down here is amazing. That's why we've got St Ives September Festival, which is a new music festival that goes on for 2 weeks in St Ives. And you've got different clubs like the Arts Club, where I perform quite a lot throughout the year. And it's just lovely to see younger people than myself being able to play music in a small town and then grow from that.
Yes, because a lot of people in your position would be tempted to move to the bright lights of London, but you're able to carry on with your dream, pursue your passion down there in St Ives.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in that situation, don't get me wrong. I kind of moved to London and I decided that it really wasn't for me. I mean, I think being a happy place, a place is what you make it. A place is, I mean, I'm a happy person. If I got put in London, I'd still be happy in London, you know? But yeah, I come back and forth to London, but every time I come back here, it's just a breath of fresh air.
Oh, making me want to hop on a train.
I know.
For the weekend.
It's only 5 hours away.
Very generous.
Yeah.
It's only a casual 5 hours.
We'll come and listen to you at the Arts Club.
Yes,
what do you
we
think?
will.
We'll
Love
make a
to
night
do
of
that.
it.
Molly Hocking, it's been a pleasure.
Definitely.
We've got to go. Thank you so much for your time this morning, flying the flag for St Ives. That's it from me and from Andrew, Stephen and Anne. We'll be back bright and early tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. It's a cold start out there for many of us. A frost in places, foggy for some as well, damp for others. So a mixture across the UK at the moment. But we've all got something in common, and that is a large area of high pressure extending from the east. That's mostly keeping these weather fronts at bay, but one such feature has snuck in from the west to affect Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England during the last 24 hours. Now for Scotland and the far north of England, it is a damp and dull start to the day, the rain continuing through much of the day here. Northern Ireland, brighter skies arrive, but for much of England and Wales, dense fog patches first thing. Could be tricky on the roads, for example. The fog does slowly lift and brighter skies do emerge in the south and across Wales, where we see that happening 7 to 11 Celsius, but where we do see some stubborn fog persisting into the afternoon, 2 to 5 Celsius. It is actually a little milder for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, however, because we've got a bit more of a southerly breeze here. That breeze will push the rain into eastern Scotland, the northeast of England by the end of the night tonight. But elsewhere across the UK, a lot of cloud remains. Low cloud through central parts, some dense fog patches by dawn, and again a touch of frost in places. Now the brightest skies first thing tomorrow will be across parts of Wales and the southwest. Northern Ireland as well faring well for sunshine, and eventually western Scotland. The rain in the far northeast eventually peters away, so most places will see a dry Friday, and the fog in the south will also lift. I think more likely to lift compared with recent days because the breeze from the east is picking up. Now that breeze will become an increasingly dominant feature of the forecast over the next few days. It will tend to prevent a fog and frost forming at night, but it will also bring colder air this weekend. So brighter skies on Saturday and Sunday, but with a downturn in temperatures, some rain and hill snow showers.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip
of the iceberg. And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the